Yeah. So it's a big issue. And Tom, to tie it together, isn't it time for the Democrats to put these two issues side by side, and have President Biden run for re-election, proposing not only to lower the Medicare age to 55 or 60, which he did last in 2020, but also to cover people 25 and under and shine a light on how this gun violence crisis is the leading killer of American kids, and surely a lot of medical debt that from the kids that survive. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea tying them together. I think it's brilliant. Jeff, thank you for that. That's a good one. David in Torrance, California. David, I got about 45 seconds. You got a quick one?
Yes. Basically, I wanted to mention the biggest threat that we're facing is individuals who are running as third-party candidates. These individuals that portray themselves as progressives. And I have a hard time to believe that dark money is not involved.
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. And now we've got Jill Stein, running Cornel West's campaign after she helped Donald Trump become president. Not a good thing.
Yeah, I'm hoping that at least Free Speech TV and all the progressive channels expose these people for what they're doing.
I'm with you, David. Thank you very much for the call. Hey, special thanks to Connor Arroyo, Carna Verde, Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Joyce the Hammer Nance, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Jero and Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jay LeBlanc, and Al Gorilla Rhythm. All the folks who work on this program. Louise and I are going to take a couple days off, so much of next week he will be hanging out with Jefferson Smith. So please be nice to him. And I'll be back right after the 4th of July. Have a great week, a great weekend. Have a wonderful weekend. In fact, be good to yourself and the people around you. Get out there, get active, tag You're It. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
If you are trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581.
Hey, this is Reverend Mitchell L. E. Kenna Johnson inviting you to join me every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Yes, that's early. So when you get there, you'll find information, education, and you may just be entertained. That's the My Community Plan Foundation Hour, Sunday mornings at 7 on WCPT Radio 820 AM, because facts matter.
It's 4 a.m. Monday, and you're literally sucking baby snot through a tube because she's congested. Man, that's love. And if you love her that much, love her enough to make sure she's buckled in the right car seat. To make sure your child's in the right seat for their age and size, visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Show them you love them. Keep them safe. Visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
This is 8 News. I'm Rita Foley. This morning, Russian media is reporting that a criminal investigation targeting Wagner mercenary group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin is continuing, despite the Kremlin saying he'd been given amnesty. It's not clear exactly where he is at the moment. Meanwhile, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has made his first public appearance since the rebellion that demanded he be replaced.
Shoigu was shown inspecting troops in Ukraine in images aimed at projecting a sense of order after a weekend that saw armed rebels seize a Russian city and march seemingly unopposed on the capital. Shoigu is one of three powerful Russian leaders whose diverging interests led to the Wagner Group rebellion. He's the first to be seen since then. The mutinies marked the biggest challenge to President Vladimir Putin in more than 20 years of rule. Neither Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin nor General Staff Chief Valery Gerasimov has been seen or heard in public since the weekend. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Sending Pam Morris Walton through.
The U.S. is hoping that what's been going on in Russia will help Ukraine.
I'll check right now.
Okay, thank you.
An added distraction for Putin and for Russia, I think, is to the advantage of Ukraine.
He was on NBC's Meet the Press. A tornado killed one person as severe weather hit parts of Indiana, Tennessee, and other states, too. Millions of Americans are going to see some fierce weather today. Forecasters say severe storms may produce damaging winds and large hail in the mid-Atlantic. The South may continue to see dangerous heat. Losing lots of weight may soon be as easy.
I'm not seeing any. Oh, hang on. Now it's popping up.
Okay,
Shows
great.
high-dose oral versions of the medication and the blockbuster drugs Ozempic and Wegovy may work as well as the injections. This is AP News. Now a tough question.
Now that it's determined...
And Pam Morris Walton, could you please talk for me, please?
...have been lost.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Maritime experts...
Good morning, Santita. I'm doing well. How are you? Wonderful hearing your voice always.
Millions of...
Can you hear everyone on Facebook?
I sure do. You can hear her now?
Yes, I can hear everyone.
Fantastic.
That doesn't address
Thank you, pardon me.
of whether wealthy
Mrs. Walton, while I get the rest of my...
responsibility.
Gotta get some of these scores. Go ahead. You go right ahead. Thank you so much. Go ahead and do you. I understand. Well, I don't know if it's me, but certainly it's the show.
Driver laws, which charge motorists for rescue if they ignore barricades on flooded roads. But insiders like former Grand Canyon Park Ranger Butch Farabee oppose charging thrill seekers for help. I'm Jackie Quinn.
And I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Michael Carroll. For today, we'll have mostly cloudy skies and breezy conditions with a chance for some showers early on, then scattered showers and storms more likely into the afternoon as highs reach the mid-70s. Then for tonight, still lingering chance for some showers and thunder showers in the evening, a low of 62. Looking to stay dry with more in the way of sunshine returning Tuesday in the upper 70s. And that's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently at 69.
This is Ron Whittingham, and I'm co-owner of Megan Financial, an independent retirement and financial services firm here in Chicago. We've built our business on playing the long game, teaching financial literacy to our clients to prepare them for a great future and a dignified retirement. Investments, pensions, 401ks, they're all pretty complicated. We make sure that you understand it all. Give us a call at 708-444-1090. We're Megan Financial, and we're your partners in a happier retirement. Or visit us at megent.com.
Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors LLC, member of FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. The views depicted in this broadcast are general in nature and provided for informational use only. The views are not necessarily those of Cetera Advisors LLC. They should not be considered a specific investment or tax advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Keep in mind that investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Investment decisions should be based upon an individual's own goal, time horizon, and tolerance for risk. Consult your investment and/or tax professional regarding your unique situation.
The Takedown with Cliff Schechter.
Here's the 10 most amazing Biden successes, the ones you must know that the media will not tell you about. Number 4, healthcare. This is an easy one. For a generation, Democrats tried to get Medicare to have the ability to bulk negotiate to lower the prices of prescription drugs. Republicans blocked it en masse. Joe Biden said he was going to make it a priority. He made it a priority. Folks, under Medicare, these drugs are now 57% to 75% lower. Imagine the savings. He also capped insulin at $35 per month, something Republicans also fought and tried to block. Also, veterans, burn pits. Many veterans were sickened by burn pits in Afghanistan, Iraq, with burning oil and other fuels. And of course, Republicans refused to spend it. Joe Biden came out with a little help from Jon Stewart in the end and embarrassed them into having to pass this bill and fund their veterans. Really successful on healthcare.
Hear more from Cliff at heartlandsignal.com and subscribe to his YouTube page.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Okay, how much time do we have?
For over a century.
3 minutes.
Okay,
Is
thank
evolved
you,
with the
thank you.
needs of the community. From politics to pop culture, we keep you informed, bringing you the most relevant news online, on air, and on the go. You have trusted us with your news, sports, weather, and entertainment. Trust us to keep moving with you. Text radio to 52886 and tell Congress local broadcasting is here to stay.
Hi, I'm Smokey Bear, and I made an assistant to help you out, because only you can prevent wildfires.
Hey, Assistant Smokey Bear, call me Papa Bear, because I'm grilling up dinner. Do you get it?
Yes, good job.
So, what should I do with all these coals?
Don't just toss them out. Put them in a metal container because those embers can start a wildfire.
I understand. The stakes are high.
Ha, 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 ha.
Learn more at SmokeyBear.com.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
My dad served in Vietnam, the 82nd Airborne Division. He never talked about it, and my mom knew not to ask. So Dad buried himself in work and self-medicated, and would lose his temper sometimes. Loud noises would put him on edge. It got rough, so I finally said to him, Dad, you gotta get help.
As a family member or friend, you may be the first to notice when a veteran you love has been going through changes. Things like withdrawing, drinking more, or increased anger could be a sign of a larger health concern, but help is available.
Dad finally went to VA for one-on-one and group therapy and got some really great tools to help him manage things. And I got my dad back.
Listen to hundreds of inspiring stories at maketheconnection.net and learn how you can support the veterans in your life. Treatment works. Recovery is possible.
Don't you wish your life
Sister
came with
Pam, how
60
are
seconds,
you?
everyone.
That dog does not want to be petted.
Just a little heads up before something bad happens,
Move your coffee cup away from your computer. Oh, no, 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 no.
so you can have more control.
Stop. You're texting your boss by mistake.
Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes like managing your weight, getting active, stopping smoking, and eating healthier, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. It's easy to learn your risk. Take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Warning. The cap is loose on that ketchup.
Don't wait.
10 seconds.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Visit doihaveprediabetes.org
All right, let's have a great show,
today.
everybody.
That's doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am free.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Getting a little bit of feedback here, but we're working that out. It's Monday, June 26th. 2023. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Got a lot to talk about today. Boy, oh boy, if you blink this weekend, if you blink every day, haven't you noticed that we're living in a time in which so much is happening all at once? Well, it seems that Vladimir Putin There was a challenge to his power. Although unsuccessful, he has been, according to some people, he's not his hold on power is not as strong as it was or as strong as it appeared last week. We'll have to see. Let's talk about that with this panel. I want to know what you thought about the actions in Russia over the past couple of days. It really happened within 36 hours. The Wagner Group, known as mercenaries, indeed, they are known to do a lot of the work that the Army should not do well, and they are all over Africa. They are a very, very interesting group. We're going to be talking about that and what happened with them today. We heard that the head of the Wagner Group was not going to face any charges, and now we hear that he will be. We will just have to see. Let's talk about it with the group today, and how will this all impact the 2023 election? What is more important, foreign policy or domestic policy? Or will foreign policy shape our domestic policy? It already in many respects is. We have given so much money to Ukraine. As America is struggling, as the world is de-dollarizing, as more and more nations are lining up with BRICS, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That is really the global South, the developing world. What will that mean? What will it mean for the dollar no longer to reign supreme? We are on track for that, everybody. It would cause a massive reset in our standard of living here in not just in Chicago, as I almost said, but all over the country. So let's talk about that today. I want to know what you think is more important, foreign policy, domestic policy. What should be America's focus? And what do you think about what happened in Russia? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Ari down there in Brazil, all my brothers and sisters down there. I think I'm going to be spending some time in Brazil. I love it. I love it. I love it. Sending you so much love today, Dave Dowling and Robert Williams, all my morning stars. You all get up so early. Carol Soskin out there in the hills of Beverly in LA, my dear. And of course, my beloved, all of you are my beloveds. And Paula Garcini Zipster, she was one of our founding morning stars. I want to give all of you much love. Hey, Jewel, sending you much love. And Andre, my god brother, Linear Bob, Barbara Bacon out there in Oak Park, Illinois. I hope that you all will meet us at the Rainbow Push International Conference, July 15th through the 19th. I'm going to have a birthday in the middle of all of that. That's not the reason to come to the conference. The conference is going to have conversations with Megan Financial. We're going to have a financial literacy seminar. You need to be there for that. And they are willing to be your advisors, your financial advisors. You know how you always hear that wealthy people are financial advisors? No, that's not what Megan Financial does. They look for working class people. They look for middle class people. They want to be your financial advisors, and they want to help you to understand, to be financially literate. That and so much more, so many others. And then we're going to have the 40th anniversary celebration of Reverend Jesse Jackson's run for the presidency. His Southern Crusade began in the spring of 1983. Now, the Southern Crusade began his voter registration drive, at which more Americans were registered to vote by him than any American in the history of the Republic. Yes, Reverend Jesse Jackson has registered more American voters than anyone in American history. We got to talk about that, celebrate it, and see where we go from here. So I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. I want to hear what you're thinking about Russia. I want to know what you think about how the actions in Russia could impact Ukraine. What do you think? What do you think? What does it mean to have a nuclear superpower? A nuclear superpower. Not maybe be as stable as they once were. What does that mean? Who would come to power? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Let's get to some of these headlines, everybody, as a robot is combing the ocean floor for debris from the Titan submersible. Authorities continue to investigate what caused the vessel to implode on its expedition to the Titanic. Just saw a heartbreaking interview with Mrs. Dawood, the wife and mother of two of those who perished aboard that vessel. Russia may have avoided an insurrection over the weekend, but there are still a lot of questions about what transpired, according to this CNN report. It's unclear what will happen to the Wagner Group leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Prigozhin. That's right. Excuse me, Prigozhin. Wow. What's going on with me this morning? Who led the insurrection against Russian military leadership? What do you think is going to happen with him? What do you think is going to happen? Russian President Vladimir Putin, they say, looks weak as a result. But is that the truth? He's one of the most popular figures in the history of leadership in modern-day Russia. So is that really true? Several cities in northern India are experiencing heavy rain after a sweltering heat wave. In the U.S., we're experiencing the same. Hundreds of thousands of people are without power across the southeast and the Ohio Valley after tornado-spawning storms slammed the region. Separately, a new analysis shows that extreme floods are happening far more often than federal data suggests, which could seriously affect everything from the building of new roads and bridges to the rising cost of flood insurance. Indeed, I was just talking with my aunt who lives out in Oakland, California yesterday, and what they have reported is true. It is now virtually impossible to get your house insured, particularly in certain areas, because of floods, fires, and on and on and on. What are people going to do without housing insurance? Cleanup has begun after a trail derailment, in Montana over the weekend, which caused a bridge across the Yellowstone River to collapse and sent several train cars into the water below. No injuries, thankfully, were reported. Some of the train cars were carrying molten sulfur and asphalt, while two cars carrying sodium hydrogen sulfate did not land in the river, according to the Montana Rail Link. The company said it's continuing to test public drinking water and will monitor the impact on the nearby area. The Supreme Court has revived Biden administration immigration guidelines that prioritize which non-citizens to detain and which to deport. Friday's 8-1 ruling dismisses a challenge from Republican state attorneys and attorney generals in Texas and Louisiana who had argued that the policies conflicted with immigration law. It also tightens the rules around when states can challenge federal policies with which they disagree. In Chicago, we're expecting a high of 73 degrees, and there will be showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 83 degrees, scattered showers. In Major League Baseball, the Cardinals 7, the Cubs 5, the White Sox 4, the Red Sox 1, the Twins 6, the Tigers 3. In the WNBA, the Sun 96, the Sky 72, and the Storm will be facing off against the Lynx tomorrow. Those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Of course, we have got the magnificent Pam Morris Walton. Indeed, she is our gospel sister, an icon in our church and our religious and spiritual lives, and we thank God for her every single day. And you're going to give us some good news, but first we want to know the title of your book and how we can get it. You can get an autographed copy, or you can just go and call. You can go to Amazon right now and just get a copy. So let us know the name of the book and how we can get it, an autographed copy.
Good morning to you, Santita. Yeah. I just love you.
I love you.
I love you, and I really thank God for you. I really do. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, now there's that.
You can do about it. you can get like for 57 days to wait for a new heart, spark a spiritual journey of faith and love on Amazon.com. You can order it at Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and it's also an ebook. And you can get an autographed copy by going to my website, PamMorrisSpeaks.com. I'm happy to be alive, and I'm happy to continue to be on God's wake-up list with Mario's Heart every day.
God bless you.
The good news today, thank you. The good news today is something that you may have made, some of your callers may remember that I may have said some months ago, but in the spirit world and realm, I feel that I need to tell you this with everything going on in our country. Words can heal. Using these words and increase your chances, who I'm speaking to, your chances for success and your chances for happiness. I am special. Just say it as often as you need to say it throughout your day, your week. I am unique. I feel good about myself. I keep my commitments. I am beautiful. I have a purpose in life. I am significant and I am needed. I am responsible and I am strong. I expect great things to happen. Positive words just like that affect your health, reduce stress, and they create a peace of mind. And this is why, because you attract into your life what you radiate, what you think, what you say, give, and love. Just remember, words can heal. Thank you, Santita. Have a great day.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Blessings to you. You know, as a man thinketh, so is he. So is he. Change your vibration. I thank you for that. Again, how can we get your book?
You're welcome. You can get it at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. You can order it at either one of those. It's on iTunes, and also it's an ebook. So if you have a Kindle or something like that and those tablets, you can order it and read it as you go about your time, your day, because the book is inspiring. I lived my story, and I'm living to tell you about it. You can read about it. 57 days in the hospital, Santita, and it was difficult to tell you I was there. But if you read the pages, it'll tell you why I couldn't tell you.
Amen. Everybody, Pam Morris Walton, we just thank God for her, and she just keeps on going. And if you see her, you would never know that she had a transplant. You know, this week I'm going to reach out. Well, Dr. Shanita.
I'm wearing the scars.
Well, you know, I want to talk
I'm
with
wearing
you.
those scars.
Well, you know, I want to talk with you about transplants and being a donor, because that's something that a lot of people have a lot of misgivings about. And because, you know, particularly in the Black and brown and indigenous communities, we have been experimented upon, particularly Black people, because that's what happened on the slave plantations. And it happened, I mean, the reason Fannie Lou Hamer missed the March on Washington was because she had something called the Mississippi appendectomy. Black women would go into their doctor's office for a routine exam and they'd be sterilized. So there understandably are a lot of misgivings, a lot of pushback that we have, but there's something to be said for getting being on that list. You're going to save someone's life. Stop the love you save, or the life you save.
Because I would not be
your
here.
own. Yeah, that's right.
I wouldn't be here with you on these various Monday mornings if somebody would not have saved my life with their heart.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here.
And we have to talk about that, because a lot of people are not here because they've been experimented upon. So, but we've got to, as we continue to fight for our rights, we have to fight for that right too. So, because you would not be here were it not for Mario and the donation of his heart. And we thank God for him and his family today. We thank God for you and your example. Sending you so much love. Pam Morris Walton, everybody. Pam Morris Walton. We have got Dr. Shanita Knighton, infection preventionist, with us today. And Dr. Knighton, what's on your mind? I know later on in the week we're going to explore maternal mortality, which America leads the developed world, okay, the rich countries, if you will, in maternal deaths. The quickest way for a woman to die, it seems, is to give birth, which is tragic and completely uncalled for. But there are so many other issues as we are looking at, boys, it's hot fun in the summertime. But I want you to know I ran to one of my little fast food places to get some coffee and some tea yesterday. And I got something for a friend of mine who was in the car. And I said, ooh, wipe that condiments packet, because a friend of mine had mold on hers. And she almost passed out in the car. She said, you've got to be kidding. I said, wipe it down. Oh, what's on your mind today, Dr. Knighton? It's wonderful hearing your voice.
Good morning, Santita. So it's interesting because I know we talk about people becoming ill. And when I think about illness, one of the things that we rarely ask ourselves is the how. And we don't take into account what's happening with the body. And I know we've talked about this before. And so oftentimes I know that we're talking about infection prevention and control in regards to physically, what can be done, such as hand hygiene, such as distancing, such as cleaning surfaces, which are all good. But it's also paying attention to what we are putting inside of the body. I've had this conversation before around 75 grams of sugar, and how 75 grams of sugar, which is a pastry as well as a cup of coffee, can lower the immune system for 5 hours. And what can happen is that can have a compounding effect, meaning, let's say at 2 o'clock, you consume a pastry and a cup of coffee, and then at 4 o'clock, which is only 2 hours into your 5 hours of a weakened immune system, you consume something else that is bad for you, then that continues to keep that cycle going. And so when someone ends up with a cold or they're like, oh, I'm under the weather, it's a combination of them eating bad, and then they have other things going on, such as stress. It could also be touching on surfaces as well. And so I'm bringing these up because we will say, oh, I must have caught this cold from here, or I must have caught this cold from there. Our bodies will tell us when it is in trouble. It will tell us when it is facing too much of bad, meaning if it's too acidic. It'll let us know if it's too sweet, meaning like that there is that growth of fungus that I continue to talk about. So our bodies have a normal amount of candida in it, which is a fungus, at about 20%. But we know that bacteria, we know that illness likes to feed off of sugar within the body. So having too much sugar in the body then gives the body an opportunity to continue to produce more fungus, more bad things, which then causes disease because it causes our organs to not function right. And so in us talking about infection prevention and control, my reminder to people today is that when you are thinking about, am I sick, how do you offset your illnesses with some of your behaviors? So if you know that you are stressed out, being stressed and not getting sleep is not a good combination that will stop you from getting ill. If you are stressed out, being stressed out and consuming sugary beverages, including alcohol beverages, is not a good way to stop you from being sick. If you are stressed out and let's say you are eating bad foods, meaning foods with additives, foods that are not nutrient dense, and you're doing this as a result of being ill, because some people, they will stress eat, then just know that these are also ways that you can become sick, not necessarily because of the physical contact, but because you have to take care of your body in order for it to take care of you.
There's a lot of talk today about sugar, but I remember when Dr. Atkins, when his program became popular, his biggest foe was the World Health Organization. They came after him with a fierceness. And then, of course, you would see advertised on television, this is the Atkins diet. And, to fully disclose, I was one of his actual patients in New York. That's where his clinic was. And it was the first time I actually had a breakthrough on weight loss. First time. And those 11 days that I could not have anything sweet, Dr. Knighton, completely changed my life, because it really was a reset, but it was like the hardest 11 days I'd ever had. I could not have anything sweet. I could have no sweetener, nothing. It was so difficult. But they needed to see, where my body was, because I found out with all of the great healthcare that I've had, no one knew I was hypoglycemic, which also goes to discrimination against overweight people, because people don't look for other issues you have because you're overweight. That's the big issue. It's just a whole lot that goes into it. But he wanted you off of that refined white sugar. And the whole industry came in on it. So I thank you for your word today. How can we reach out to you on social media?
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is Hey Dr. Nina. And so if you go to Hey Dr. Nina, then you'll find some prevention tips. Yes, I know it has been 2 weeks since a wonderful post has been put up, but I promise you I'm going to be back on it, because, look, I've been in the midst of ramping up my study, and even too, Santita, like some point this week, I want to talk about that as well. Because it is a government-funded study. It's one of those things that we tend to not talk about when we talk about going into hospital settings, which would be patient safety as it relates to infection prevention and control.
Okay.
So I look forward to talking about that this week, as well as having some discussions around safety during the summer. And when I'm saying safety during the summer, many would think because of my background it would be about infection prevention and control, but it's actually talking about safety when it comes to heat exhaustion, when it comes to safety of children, hot cars, pets.
Of course.
So I think that we should touch upon those topics as well, because again, it is a part of prevention. And just as I always emphasize, prevention is better than treatment.
Dr. Shanina Knight and everybody, let's talk about Russia and what almost happened there this weekend. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278. Back in just a minute. Great hearing your voice this morning.
Yes, likewise. Yours too.
Oh, boy.
So, look, these kids, they had competition this week, so they've actually made it to nationals. So I'm in Orlando.
Really? Oh, get out of here. Congratulations.
Yeah, yep. So this is the week. So this is the telltale, and I'll say it all the time, but Cleveland is on the map, not just because of LeBron, but we actually got some teams out here that are winning World of Dance and been doing amazing things, and so it's exciting.
Well, that is wonderful. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you, and all three. Thank you. All three of my kids made it, so.
Oh, this has got to be so exciting. I know you're going to be posting this week. You got to.
I'm going to work on it. I am horrible when it comes to, keeping up with stuff. I'm one of those people that's, really living in the moment.
Me too.
So,
Me too.
I'll have a lot of experiences. I'll be a lot of places. And when somebody did you do this? I could tell you all about it in detail, because I really lived it. But I can't, they be like, well, where the pictures at? I'm like, look, I don't have them because I was too busy living it, and I'm able to give you these details because I was in it.
Well, I tell you, because I keep it in my mind's eye. My father would always he had a photographer on staff, so he would have photographers at everything that we did, which kind of spared us from having to take the pictures ourselves. Because, people are like, well, why didn't you take a picture when you were there? I'm like, honey, I was so busy living, enjoying myself. I don't want to sit there. Everybody take a picture. Stop having fun. Stop the conversation. Get out of here. And that's a pain for me now. Yeah.
Oh, me too.
I don't like
Me too. Trust me.
I don't like it.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, but I've got to do something. Oh, wait a minute. Lainey Kazan. Wait a minute. Carol Soskin. I'm a big Lainey Kazan fan. Oh my goodness. When you see Miss Kazan, please give her my love. I love her. Lainey Kazan, oh my gosh, you're a little young for Lainey Kazan, but you're just a brilliant entertainer. I love her. Love her. Oh my gosh. Carol Lainey Kazan showed her a photograph of her with Reverend. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
So sweet.
Oh yeah, I love Lainey Kazan. I love her. I love her. So, okay.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I'm excited for your family, and honey, I hear you. It's just, we're living in this world now where, folks want to see what you're doing, but I kind of draw the line on my family stuff. My brother Yusuf is great at it because he takes pictures all the time.
Sending Bryce Green, Dwight McKee, and Attorney Patillo through.
And I'm just like, honey, go for it. I'm not going to do all that.
That's it. Yeah, but you know what I mean.
But that's the world we're living in. They want that. So I'm trying to figure out how to integrate. But I got to tell you, I mean, ugh.
No, I get it. But I mean, I think the thing is with so many different filters, let's say, that can be put on pictures and so many different things that can create an illusion, of what can be a good time, but is it really a good time? FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. Those are all real things, but unfortunately, I think mentally or internally, I would rather feel the experience and then visually see it, opposed to seeing something and then not feeling anything because I'm too busy trying to create that experience for others through a lens.
Look, honey, you got to live your own life. I can't live. I can't.
That's it. So it's just
do that.
It's just my look. It's just my preference. But I'll be like,
60 seconds.
Oh my gosh, take a picture. Take a picture.
I know.
No.
Stand by, everybody. Absolutely, I just can't do that. I just can't. So, hello, everybody. Hello, Robert. Everybody, come off mute.
Good morning. How are you?
Great, Dwight.
Good morning.
Okay, all right, everybody. Bryce.
Morning.
Good morning,
Santita.
Bryce. How you doing? I'm so glad to hear your voice. It's been too long.
It has been a long time.
I know.
But just wrapped up a lot of stuff on this end, so I have some more free time.
Yay. Yay. Well, we got a lot to talk about this morning. So let's get to it.
Ten seconds, everybody.
Thank you, Devin.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, July 15th through the 19th, Rainbow Push International Conference. You want to be there to have discussions just like this. You know, when you get to the water cooler, or whether it's figurative or literal, you kind of want to know what's going on in the world. And I said, so let me call some of the smartest people I know, and let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about the Wagner Group. Let's talk about what happened in Russia this weekend. Was it a coup? Was it an attempted coup? Was it an opportunity that Mr. Prigozhin took to try and get things right? Some people have been saying that Putin is not moving with enough aggression when it comes to Ukraine. Is that what he was trying to do? I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you think that America was involved in any way? Some people are saying that they believe that. What does that mean? Or perhaps we were not involved. Was this coming from the ground up, given that the Wagner Group was cheered as they drove through the streets of Russia? But, you know, they have people who like them, but they're also people who really, really like Vladimir Putin. He remains an overwhelmingly popular figure in Russia, everybody. Do not forget that. I mean, that's something that the corporate media in the West does not report. He is extremely popular with approval ratings well north of 70%, way, way, way past what our own president is experiencing, who is really struggling in the United States. So let's talk about this today. What actually happened? Was it a coup attempt? Was it a resurrection? What's the difference? Call us at 773-763-9278. What does it mean for Russia? At least in the West, is being portrayed as less stable today than it was last Friday. What does that mean? It's one of the world's two top superpowers, nuclear superpowers. Does that make us safer? Does it make us less safe? Oh, we've got Robert Patillo, brilliant radio host from WAOK in Atlanta, of course, from Rainbow Push, and a brilliant civil rights attorney, and of course, brilliant social scientist, Dwight McKee, Dean of the MAFA Redemption Project here in Chicago. And, of course, Bryce Green, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, someone who's given us some of the most balanced reporting about Ukraine and what's happening in that part of the world that we've been able to read in the broader media. So let me start with you, Bryce. What happened? When I woke up on Saturday morning, or should I say when I rolled over and turned on the television, you would have thought a coup had actually occurred in Russia. All of the top line reporters were on duty, and it's like they were ready. You know what I mean? It's not like they had to be rolled out of bed. They were ready for this. What happened, Bryce?
Right. So on Saturday, the head of the Russian private military corporation, the Wagner Group, essentially declared that Russian military forces had attacked the Wagner group, had shot an artillery or done an airstrike, killing some of their men, and that Prigozhin was going to march on Moscow as a sort of retaliation. Now, there's not good evidence to support this claim that the Wagner group was actually bombed by the Russian military, but there's been a long-standing tradition for the last several months of Prigozhin making bombastic statements criticizing Putin and Russia's war in general. Now, the Wagner group is important because they were at the front lines of the most recent capture of Bakhmut, which was the longest battle in this Ukrainian war. They were fighting over that for months. And all throughout that time, or especially in the last few months, Prigozhin was complaining publicly about Vladimir Putin and the defense minister Shoigu about their not providing the Wagner group with enough ammo, with enough support. And they were complaining about extremely high losses. And so this has caused a lot of eruption over there. And the way that the Russian state operates is that it's not as regimented as one might imagine based on the Western reporting about how Putin is an autocrat. Power centers have their own ability to make big plays. And we've seen this happen in Russia's history before. I mean, in 1991, Boris Yeltsin showed up to the Russian parliament with tanks. And so Western commentators were really suggesting that this might be a similar moment. But throughout all the bombast, the Western media, they jumped extremely hard at this. I mean, we already started seeing reports in the Western press about how this could be the end of Vladimir Putin. This could be Russia's or Putin's Tsar Nicholas II moment. But the problem with that is that it really overestimates both the ability and the inclination of the Wagner group to actually combat the Russian military. I mean, remember, the Wagner group is only, 25, 30,000 individuals, whereas the Russian military, the regular army, still has, hundreds of thousands of people in it. And so the idea that this is a civil war, I think, has been dramatically overblown. Calling it an insurrection, maybe. But the fact is that this was solved pretty quickly, especially relative to what we consider to be civil wars. The Belarusian president, Viktor Lukashenko, he intervened on behalf of peace and stability in that region, and he came to an arrangement with Prigozhin, where Prigozhin would then move to Belarus. And so that pretty much ended this episode. I mean, not that there aren't remaining problems, not that there hasn't been a shake to the foundation of what people consider to be Russian legitimacy. But the fact is that there does not seem to be any civil war going on. And this pretty much comes as a disappointment to American hawks. I mean, ever since the 1990s, American planners have been begging for a more hawkish position on Russia, trying to break it up or turn it into what's been called a giant gas station. And that's been, if you read the publications of some of the most hawkish think tanks in Washington, that's what they're expecting to happen as a result of this Ukraine war. That as long as the U.S. continues to support Ukraine, it might grind Russia down and exacerbate the tensions within that country, which could lead to an overthrow of Putin. Now, there are a number of problems with this, namely that it doesn't seem like the U.S. and NATO can actually defeat the Russian army. Throughout this whole time, throughout this whole quote-unquote coup period, this was during the long-anticipated spring/summer offensive on the part of the Ukrainian army. And they have yet to even breach the first line of defense. And even after the Wagner group declared that they were marching on Moscow, the Ukrainians still weren't able to capitalize on that. And so the idea that this is going to fracture Putin and push him out of power, I think, is somewhat fanciful. But even if that was the case, what American media don't really like to think about, what they don't consider, is that there's no guarantee that what comes after Vladimir Putin is going to be any more humane or any more amenable to Western dictates. I mean, all evidence points to the opposite, that if Putin were to go, he'd be replaced by more hawkish people. And if the Western hawks get exactly what they want, which is, a Russian civil war, well, then they have to answer the question about what happens to a country with the largest nuclear arsenal in the world if its central government becomes fractured. I mean, American planners have been very, very reckless with nuclear policy and how exactly they're going to handle this escalation in Ukraine. But a civil war in Russia would throw things into such disarray that any guarantees of security are out the window. Who knows what could happen with these nuclear weapons? But luckily, throughout this whole period, we did not see a deployment of nuclear weapons and activation of nuclear weapons, which is certainly a good thing. But like I said, the American hawks, they're frothing at the mouth at the idea of Russia fracturing. And while Russia still has internal divisions represented by Prigozhin, represented by the wide support for the Wagner Group and criticism of Putin's war, despite all of that, that doesn't seem to be in the cards. And so when American media will make large pronouncements about what this event means, just be sure to be skeptical. Don't dive into the hysteria about this being the end of Russia. I mean, you should take a wider view and just understand this as an internal dispute that was solved quickly, but still has lingering effects.
Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you think this is the end of President Putin, or was he able to successfully snuff out a resurrection? An insurrection. What's the difference between an insurrection and a coup? Or is there one? Or a coup attempt? Bryce? Is that what we saw? Was this an attempted coup, or was he trying to get Putin's attention? I mean, what do you think happened here?
Well, to me, it just seemed like he was trying to get Putin's attention, right? I mean, if it was an attempted coup, if there were columns marching on Moscow with the intention of taking over the city and dethroning Putin, well, I think the Russian military has ways of dealing with that. Namely, they could have used their air superiority to wipe the Wagner Group off the map. Wagner Group does not have the air support required to defend off the Russian military. So if that threat was there, well, then I don't think that would have been dealt with the same way. Therefore, I don't think that it's fair to call this a coup. You might be able to call it a very insubordinate protest on the part of Prigozhin against the Russian defense minister. But, I mean, this is really an issue of definitions. However, I don't think that the Russian state itself was in actual danger. But, we've had this discussion about what's a coup, what's an insurrection when we talk about January 6th. Mm-hmm. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been any agreement among people about what exactly that was. But to say that the Russian state was imperiled or that it's at risk of breaking up, I think is an overstatement, an exaggeration. But there are certainly divisions, just like January 6th showed in America. There are certainly divisions. Yeah, but that does not mean that the state was at risk of being overthrown.
It did feel like January 6th to me. I said, there's a lot of people who were up on the Hill were part of intelligence. They were part of the army. They were part of the police. They were part of the armed forces. So, well, Robert Patillo, are you there?
I am indeed.
So what do you think happened here? Because I know you've been speaking internationally to media about this. Your thoughts?
Well, I think it was a bit more of a serious challenge to Putin than a protest. The reason I think that is because of Putin's speech on Saturday night, where he vowed to stomp out these individuals, ostensibly called them traitors, and promised to kill them. So I think Putin took this very seriously, and because of that, I think the rest of us should take it seriously as well. If you look at what Prigozhin has been announcing, particularly with regards to Shoigu, during the combat around Bakhmut, it's very clear that he has lost any level of control or respect for the Russian command structure, and that he believes that the Wagner mercenaries, which are ostensibly the real-life suicide squad, they recruit prisoners or recruit convicts from not just Russia but around the world to fight secret wars. If you look at the Wagner Empire, they have oil mines in Libya, they have diamond mines in the Sudan, they run parliaments, they destroy governments, they sponsor coups around the world. So despite being a smaller force, they control much of the resources of Africa, which is the fighting in South Sudan right now. You see Wagner forces involved there. When you march on the capital of your country, that is imagine a general at the U.S. southern border deciding he's going to take 20,000 of his own troops and then just start marching towards Washington, D.C. Along the way, they capture Dallas, Texas, they capture Fort Hood, and they're greeted as liberators on their way. And then they get to within 200 miles of the U.S. Capitol, ostensibly to Virginia-ish. And then at that point in time, they make an agreement not to go through. From telegram sources that we have heard inside of the Kremlin, many people believe that the reason that Prigozhin was so bold is that he had allies within the Russian government that were assisting him. This is why there was no military response. They literally just walked into these cities the same way that the little green men walked into Crimea in 2014. They were able to take Rostov-on-Don and then other areas throughout the southeast or southwest of Russia. I think that the agreement that was brokered, one thing to pay attention to is that Lukashenko came out very quickly. Lukashenko, who's been a puppet of Putin for 20 years, and announced that he was taking credit for the armistice deal between the Wagner Group and the Russians. That is very odd to me because Lukashenko has never been anything other than a junior partner to Putin. So what many people believe, based on some of the previous accounts, announcements from Wagner, including troops telling their families goodbye before marching off, is that it is believed that he was supposed to be joined on that march to Moscow, because remember, he got to within 200 miles of Moscow by other forces that were supporting him, including Korolev with the Chechen separatists, and then perhaps even Lukashenko with the Belarusians, in order to push further into Russia, not to overthrow the government, but to force military change at the top of the chain of command, particularly Shoigu and the rest of the military leaders in the Kremlin. When it was announced that all of those leaders that said they were going to help Prigozhin had pledged allegiance to Putin, Prigozhin realized he was outnumbered and had to get an off-ramp, which was his exile to Belarus. For Putin, we saw late last night that they started rounding up military officials. It's said that Shoigu is now under house arrest in the Kremlin, and they're part of the agreement for Prigozhin to stop marching on Moscow was for them to make these changes at the top. So I think that this is prologue. This is the beginning of this conversation, not the end of this conversation. This is not a place where people stand down and say, oh, well, that was an interesting event over the weekend. I guess things will be fine now. Because when you're thinking about, you have Lukashenko, who's in exile. You have Korolev, who is still angry about the Chechen conflict. You have Georgian separatists that are still on the southern border mad about the Russian invasion there in 2008. You have the anti-Russian separatist forces within Russia who have been launching terrorist attacks on grain depots and fuel depots, as well as drone attacks on Moscow. So I think that Vladimir Putin is in a place currently trying to figure out who exactly within his government they can trust. And I don't think the West has their fingerprints on this, because this seems to be a being widely supported by the people in Russia, despite what goes after many of their mainstream media channels. Because if you saw those people literally greeting Prigozhin as a liberator when he came through, it seems that there may be deeper issues on Putin's hands. So I think we have to monitor these things going forward to find out exactly what is going to be happening during this exile for Prigozhin. People need to remember, Prigozhin is a murderer by trade. He spent most of the 80s and 90s in prison. He started off as Putin's chef in the mid-2000s after he had a string of hot dog carts. He served dinner to Putin and George Bush during state dinners. Then the Russian mafia got together and helped him to start this mercenary company, Wagner, because of his close relationship with Putin. And the atrocities they've committed around the world are unheard of in modern society. Murder, rape, genocides. And we have to take seriously this idea that they probably didn't just go home to retire to the farm. And I think the idea also of integrating Wagner forces into the main Russian military is a horrible idea. Imagine being a soldier, the people who may or may not have just tried to overthrow the government are now standing behind you with a rifle at any point in time. So this is the beginning of this conversation, not the end of this conversation.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, I think it was a cry for help. I think heretofore the Wagner group has been gangsters that has been bullying little African countries and little states without real armies, taking all of the goodies out, raping the women, plundering the society, and walking away kind of scot-free. But then they find themselves now in a situation where they're being used as a proxy in a country that can really fight back and has enough ammunition to go toe-to-toe with them, which they didn't expect to. They've been used by Putin as a proxy army because he knows that the war is unpopular with the Russians, and as many Russian soldiers get killed, it makes the war more unpopular. So he has them as the proxy army being sacrificed, span the lives of a lot of the Russian kids. But them not having enough weapons and enough resources to be able to deal with a real heads-up battle, and the United States arming the Ukraine with more and more sophisticated weapons has put him in a position where now he's been taking a real beat down. Talking about the Wagner group, taking a real beat down. And so now they're appealing to Putin to say, hey, if you're going to put us out here, give us something to work with and give us some more troops. And don't just sacrifice our lives. We're willing to fight, but we really need more to fight with. This is not, Africa. This is not the little colonized country that have no real weapons to fight with that we can go and bully. These folk can fight back. And so if either help us or get us out of here. And so, and I think it's part of his disenchantment with the Russian generals is they feel like that they really have not given them enough and empowered them enough to be able to properly protect themselves. So I think it was a cry for help, saying, either get us help or get us out. And Putin is in a position now where, I think he's stuck because he does not have enough resources to really give them what they need to work with, or is unwilling to do that. And he's unwilling to sacrifice too many more of those Russian kids because he knows in his heart of hearts that many of the Russians are really against this war.
and that would put him more at a risk. I think that's where the risk of the coup would come from, not so much as from the Wagner group, as these Russians who are dissatisfied, and many of them have been leaving the country by the thousands to avoid fighting the war. We don't really talk about that. And in some ways, that war has done for Russia what the Vietnam War did with America, where the young kids went to Canada not to fight. Where many of these young Russians have left Russia because they don't want to be involved in that kind of war, that protracted kind of war.
Everybody, what do you think? Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And how do you think this is going to impact election 2024 here? How will this policy, how will other foreign policies impact America as we're watching the de-dollarization that is occurring all over the world? Once that reset button has been completely depressed, it's going to change how we live every day, everybody. So we got to talk about that. On the Santita Jackson Show, July 15th through the 19th, we'll be having this kind of conversation and many others at the Rainbow Push International Conference. I want to hear from you. Make It Financial will be there having a financial literacy seminar. Can't wait for that to happen. You don't have to be rich. Working class, middle class, they want to be your financial advisors. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Keep talking, everybody. Do you have to leave right now, Bryce Green?
I got about 15 minutes.
Okay, and I will let you go then. Absolutely. But you all can keep talking. We're on Facebook Live, just so that you know. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts about this.
Well, one thing I do find interesting about Prigozhin's posturing over the last few months is that, some of the more, not the hawkish analysts, but the more sober ones are suggesting that he might be taking on this sort of anti-corruption mantle. Like, he's calling out a lot of some of the big problems with the Russian corruption that has plagued the country since the fall of communism. And he's calling it out despite being a creature of that same corruption, which is interesting.
So you guys, what do you think? Robert? Dwight? Are you all still there?
I'm here. I'm waiting for Robert.
No, I'm waiting for either of you. Dwight, your thoughts, because you called this a cry for help.
Yeah, and that's kind of the position. I don't have a reaction to that in terms of whether or not it deals with corruption. I think it's straight. No, I don't think it deals with corruption. I think it is. You have to understand how these mercenaries are. They go in the country, they usually work for the dictator. They have carte blanche because they have all the weapons, they have all the power, and they virtually go in themselves, and they get paid by plunder. They themselves plunder the country. They take the minerals out. They take the gold out the country. They take the oil out the country, and they sell it on the open market. And, and they choose the women that they want to be involved with, and they choose the men that they want to violate. I mean, it's a bully-based gangster culture, and that's how they operate. And they operate like that all over the world. They finally run into a group of people who is not having that because, they're outnumbered, they're outgunned, and the will of the people are there to not allow them to do that to them. And so now for the first time, they're taking a real whooping. And like any bully that gets slapped, he now has to rethink this relationship. And so in my opinion, they're just going back to the Kremlin saying, hey, y'all didn't tell us that this is what this was about. Y'all told us we would go in here and like with Bush, and the people would be
sending Attorney Jones through
us and clapping for us and singing hymns and songs about us. That Ukrainians would be on our side. And now we get it and find that none of that is true, that these people hate us, they despise us, and they want us to get the hell out of here. And we don't know what to do. We've been used and really don't know how to gracefully get out of here. So if you're not going to give us enough or send us enough troops to help us fight these guys, and if you're not giving us enough weapons to make us viable in this fight, then we need a new strategy. We just can't keep getting this beat down. Understand that thousands of these Wagner guys have gotten maimed or arrested or killed in this war. And they are paying a high price for this war, even more than the Russian troops are paying. Because they're kind of the front line guys. And they've been set up to take this whooping. You know, one thing about how other dictators work is that they have no sympathy. So Putin has no sympathy for what's happening with these guys. He's just trying to maintain his own power base. So being like he's concerned, as long as this protects him and gives him the cover that he needs, he's fine with it. So I think that's what you're looking at. That's just my opinion.
Well, I'm just asking you for yours. That's all. And everybody's got one, so that's important. Robert, you still there?
And
Uh-huh.
yeah, and I think the fact that Prigozhin is still alive, given Putin's track record of Russian suicides for people who oppose him, gives an indication of just the level of power that Prigozhin currently has. Because you can't risk assassinating him because he has an army behind him. It's one thing to have a gang. It's another thing to
60 seconds, everyone.
Supporters. It's a whole other thing to have an entire army with artillery and tanks and logistics and special forces behind that individual. And this is something you can go back to the Roman Empire. You never want a general to have an entire army that is loyal to him. Caesar, when he crossed the Rubicon, looked to his troops and said, we can't go back after this. And that's a very similar speech that Prigozhin gave to his troops before marching on Moscow. And then they went back. That's the difference. So I don't think that Prigozhin is done in any way, shape, or form. And we have to also remember the Russian army lost almost 100,000 men just taking Bakhmut. It's estimated they have had over 200,000 casualties during the course of this special military operation. They had to call up 300,000 conscripts last fall. Conscripts that are not really that excited about being in a war.
10 seconds.
So they have some real issues with that Russian army.
Stand by, everybody. And we have Attorney Jones.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Monday, June 26, 2023. It's a joy to be with you today as we talk about Russia and what happened over the past few days. Has Putin been weakened? What does that mean when you have got one of the, if not the top nuclear superpower in the world destabilized? What does that mean? But what does all of this mean? How will this impact Ukraine? Will this empower NATO, which is circling Russia now? Or is something else going on? Is this just an internal fight? Is this like January 6th? We have a lot of questions. And how will this impact the 2024 election here? How is foreign policy impacting or shaping how we live here? We already know that 62% of our budget is committed to the Pentagon and to militarism and wars. So it's already shaping how we live every day because when you start fighting for relief, when you start fighting for check and equal access to equal high quality health care, fair wages, and on and on and on, and the government tells you we don't have enough money, we don't have the wherewithal, well, the money's going to war. So the money's there, it's just not going to you, and it is your money. So let's talk about it at 773-763-927, 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I want to know what your thoughts are today. Got a tremendous panel who are talking to us about this. And so let's get right to it, everybody, as we look at the debris that is being collected on the ocean floor from the Titan submersible, according to this CNN report. They continue to investigate what caused the vessel to implode on its expedition to the Titanic, praying for all 5 souls that were lost below. Russia may have avoided an insurrection over the weekend, but according to the CNN report, there are still a lot of questions about what transpired. And indeed, according to the Moscow Times, Mr. Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, who led this insurrection, at first, he was not going to have charges against him. The Moscow Times, however, is reporting that the charges against him for mutiny remain. So we will see how this works. Extreme weather. Several cities in northern India are experiencing heavy rain after a sweltering heat wave that completely engulfed countries across Asia. And then what's happening in the United States? The Southeast, the Ohio Valley. After tornado spawning storms, there are power outages for thousands upon thousands of people. We have our own issues here in the United States, everybody. Cleanup has begun after a train derailment in Montana over the weekend, which caused a bridge across the Yellowstone River to collapse and sent several train cars into the water below. No injuries were reported. Thankfully, some of the train cars were carrying molten sulfur and asphalt, while 2 cars carrying sodium hydrogen sulfate did not land in the river. The Supreme Court has revived Biden administration immigration guidelines that prioritize which non-citizens to detain and which to deport. Friday's 8-1 ruling dismisses a challenge from Republican states' attorneys generals in Texas and Louisiana, who had argued that the policies conflicted with immigration law. It also tightens the rules around when states can challenge federal policies with which they disagree. In Chicago, we're expecting a high of 73 degrees, showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 83 degrees, scattered showers. Major League Baseball, the Cardinals, 7, and the Cubs 5. The White Sox, however, were triumphant 4-1 over the Red Sox, and were the Twins 6-3 over the Tigers. In the WNBA, the Sun, the Sky took a bit of a beating yesterday, 96-72. The Sun were victorious, and the Storm will be playing the Lynx tomorrow. Our soccer teams had the day off. So let's get right to it, everybody. Let's talk about what happened over the weekend in Russia. Before you go, Bryce Green, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, brilliant writer and researcher. Your thoughts before you go. What thoughts do you want to leave us with today? What should we be looking out for? I mean, as we see the media, the corporate media in the United Kingdom and Great Britain and in the United States, they're jumping up and down. They're very excited about this. Around the world, it's a different story, though. I mean, when you go to Africa, they interact with the Wagner Group. They also have good relations with Russia and Putin. It's a different story when you get to India. And how the story is reported. It's a different story when you go throughout Asia. It's a little different. So talk to us about what we should be looking for and what actually happened here.
Well, the most critical thing to watch out for is American hawks using this destabilization in Russia as an excuse to further their own hawkish positions. They've been saying for years that, Putin's weak and therefore the U.S. should press their advantage. And in the Ukraine war, they've been saying that even more. They've been saying that if we are able to grind down Russia's forces, then that could force an internal destabilization, which could force Putin out of power. But this is a very dangerous policy prescription, most notably because Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. And asking for that country or making the policy that destabilizes that country and that makes the line of succession a lot less clear, doesn't bode well for anyone on the planet, especially when you consider that the U.S. is just as committed to escalation. Right now, we're even seeing American think tanks start to suggest that the U.S. give tactical nuclear weapons to Ukraine, which is insane and could easily escalate out of control. And so this rebellion on the part of the Wagner Group, I mean, it could easily, and it already has been, fueling these hawkish sentiments. I mean, you've seen in the Atlantic talking about how anything is better than Putin, even if it's a violent succession struggle. It'll be better than Putin. I mean, this is just madness. It's the idea that you can, just break something and break it to pieces, crack it with a hammer, and that'll fix it. That's not responsible statecraft. That's not a way to conduct diplomacy around the world. We should be concerned that U.S. hawks could be using this as a way to escalate. That, to me, is my biggest takeaway.
But what about it seems the Republicans, certainly, former President Trump is running as a dove amongst the hawks. What do you make of that?
Well, even the Republican Party, you'll see more dissent against American Ukraine policy on the right more than the left for a lot of reasons. But a lot of that is for the worst reasons. That the American right wants the U.S. to focus more on China and wrap up this conflict with Russia. And so they're not necessarily doves on this position. They just have a more sensible view, almost by accident, because they want to increase American hostilities elsewhere. But that is an important point to note. Republicans have been almost the only voices in Congress who are willing to offer any sort of criticism of the U.S. blank check for Ukraine, which is important. But again, like I said, it should be placed in its proper context.
Hey, thank you so much for being with us today. Can't wait to have you back. Of course.
Thank you for having me, Santita.
Always a joy to have Bryce Green. Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. You can find his writings there and among many other places, but that is a home for him. It is a hub. It's a joy to be with you. Of course, joining Dwight McKee and attorney Robert Patillo, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Esquire from Rainbow Push, and
No, she's not here.
Oh, okay, we'll get her soon. And then we have attorney Daryl Jones. Well, Attorney Jones, what do you make of what we saw this weekend?
Wow, Santita, we saw a lot this weekend, and when we start to just unfold everything that was happening with Russia and Ukraine, what I see is this. And I listened to the analysis, and I listened to him saying that whether or not Putin's been weakened, or what is that? This much we know for sure, as they say. This did not help Vladimir Putin in any way. That much is clear. And when it comes to politics, either something is strengthening you or it's weakening you. Generally, you're not treading water. So I think that what happens with what we saw here has weakened Putin and has shown the vulnerability that's available, that the steel isn't as strong as many had predicted and may have thought about. And I tell you, he's in such an incredibly vulnerable position, because who's in a position to know the Russian military better than the person that is the mercenary in this particular situation and coming against Putin? Who's in a better position to know than somebody that was in that key leadership position? And we have at least two key leadership people in the Russian military that have now turned on him and have shown the weaknesses that are there. So Putin definitely is not in a better position, which by my definition would mean that he's in a worse position. And what becomes really interesting in my analysis, Santita, is that I consider this a victory for Ukraine, because this was supposed to be, got to remember, when they invaded Ukraine, everyone thought it was going to be quick, that they'd be in and out and little Ukraine would be done. Well, what
the Ukraine situation has done is that it has not only shown these cracks, but it has really amplified it to show the problems that are existing within a sustained military activity done on behalf of the Russian military. That's what I think the Ukraine incident has shown at this point. And those cracks now have been shown to all the world. What happens within the Russian government at this point, I think that's to be seen. But I think that the crack is there, the opening is there, and the question now becomes, where does it go from here? Interestingly, I think that the old statement that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens from here. But I can guarantee you that Putin certainly is not done with the people that led this insurrection from within his military. He's not done, and he knows that they're out there. It's interesting to watch the president of Belarus actually negotiate this. I'd like to see a little more and learn a little more with regards to how he wiggles himself middle of this and is doing this negotiation. It puts him in a very interesting, I think, as well with regards to Putin. If you're the president of Russia and you think that everyone is against you anyway, and you have someone that's trying to negotiate a truce out of this, or negotiate something out of this so that the person that's the insurrectionist can go away without being charged, you've got to start questioning that president. And I'm sure that that's one of the key things that's on Putin's mind right now. But it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays within the United States. I think that typically when it comes to foreign affairs, that unless Americans are being killed, it doesn't have much of an impact in our domestic politics, our domestic elections. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The only impact I think it will have is it'll test some of the candidates as to their knowledge and their ability to handle foreign affairs for our country.
Well, it's very interesting as I'm looking at some of the comments. Larnell Henderson said this man, who's speaking of Bryce Green, is pushing the Republican narrative. He feels that he's a Republican for sure. Tracy Lewis pretty much feels the same. It's very interesting, Robert Patillo and Dwight McKee. Let me start with you, Robert, that when you have people who I think have a more nuanced view, they're accused of being Republican. And maybe Republicans are pushing another kind of narrative, but do not Democrats and Republicans have the space to do the same thing and to see something different? I mean, particularly when you look at Russia and how it is viewed throughout the developing world, with which a world with which or with whom progressives are to be aligned. I always said at the beginning of this conflict with Ukraine, this was not going to play out just the way you thought it was going to play out, because when you look at Russia has a different relationship with Africa. I know a lot of African leaders. I know most of them. And to a person, they will tell you, Russia did not colonize us. When we've had our freedom struggles here, they have supported us. You don't get mad with me. I'm just stating the facts as they are. And I think that we have to be more broad-minded than even using the term Republican as a pejorative, as many Republicans use Democrat as a pejorative. Stop that. There is one party, it's a uni party, and it's called the Power Party. That's all there is to it. They have different cultural appeals, everybody. That's it. So the question is, in principle, where do you stand? I'm sorry, Robert?
Well, I would say that I want people to, and this was a learning process for me about a decade ago. You have to leave the American binary at the American border. So when we argue about black and white here, we go internationally, they don't understand that discussion. It's not the same thing.
No, stop. Because the American binary, people need to understand, it's just explain to people, because many folks, when you say that, it's kind of like, what? And either or, black or white. People don't see that. When you go to Ireland, Northern Ireland, black, white, no. It's the Protestants and the Catholics. And that is a real conflict. It's a real conflict. They look just alike. They're related, all of that. So I just need you to explain
here
that.
In the Middle East. Yeah, in America, our battle lines are drawn
black, white, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, etc. But that only exists here in America. As soon as you cross the border to go literally anywhere else in the world, you go to the Caribbean, and all of a sudden, you being light skinned, they call you brown, or they'll call you white, versus someone who's also of African descent but darker, and they'll call them black. It's a different binary that exists. If you're in Haiti, you have the Petit Blanc versus the Grand Blanc, which are different battle lines. If you're in the Middle East, you have Sunni versus Shia, different battle lines that exist. So when we talk about, well, that's Republican or Democrat, when you cross out of America, those lines get fuzzy. Because if you for example, your point you were making about African and the developing world support for Russia, many of those decolonization struggles and third world revolutions, as it would be in the 60s and 50s, 60s, and 70s, they got weapons from the Soviet Union. The AK-47 became the official gun of revolutionaries around the world. The fights for freedom, in large part, were funded by the Soviets. So these people don't have the same allegiance to America or to the American way of life and thinking as we did. They didn't grow up with all the 80s movies of Ivan Drago and the Russians being the Hunt for Red October, enemy at the gate. So it's a very different conceptualization.
Put a pin in that, because we were overthrowing their government. We're the ones who closed the door in Nkrumah. We're the ones who killed Lumumba. We're the ones. And I just, I think we have to be upfront about that. That was one of the things that hit Kennedy, like John F. Kennedy, like a ton of bricks. He was trying to save Lumumba's life, but the right wing of his military had helped to have him killed.
And we don't even have to go back that far. There's many people in Libya right now who the two people they hate more than anyone else are Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Why? Because they drugged Muammar Gaddafi out of a drain and killed him. So the battle lines are very different domestically versus what you see internationally. You have to be, it's almost as you have to change the way that you view things and think about things, because everybody doesn't have the same history, the same narratives, the same ideas, the same thought patterns and conversations. With regards to Republicans, it's not that they are anti-war or that they are the party of doves. They are anti-Democrats being in power, and they are willing to support anybody that they think hurts Democrats. So because Biden has been supportive of Ukraine, now they've turned Ukraine into a Hunter Biden laptop story, where the only reason we're in Ukraine is to cover up for whatever Hunter Biden was doing as part of this broad right-wing conspiracy. That's pretty crazy. And I think that we can't allow American crazy to interfere with what international policy is. And looking this coldly at what's going on in Russia right now, it really is 6 to 1 hand and a half dozen in the other. There are real questions whether or not Russia has the military manpower to survive a counterinsurgency or a domestic revolution, as it would be. You've already had over 200,000 of your best troops. They're dead, and they're not coming back. They've lost over 1,000 tanks. They're now pulling T-55s out of museums, retrofitting them and sending them to the field because they are out of any modern tanks. The reason they're called the T-55s because they were built in 1955. So imagine you see a old Bel Air or a GTO out there on the battlefield. That's the equivalent of what you're looking at. There's real questions about the Russian Air Force. We haven't seen many of the new advanced weapons that they've had, and the fact that the Russian Air Force was not deployed to attack the Wagner convoys is an indication that they maybe couldn't be deployed because so many had been destroyed in Ukraine. And it is said that during the Wagner offensive, they shot down as many as 8 Russian attack helicopters. So there is this question of whether or not Putin actually has the ability to stop Wagner, particularly if they are able to build this alliance with Karlev and the Chechen separatists, the Georgians who were invaded in 2008, the Ukrainians who are still going to be fighting them at the same time, and Belarus opening up an additional front in the war. If all those things come together,
Putin is going to have to hightail it out of town. And I think that's why you saw that level of anger from Putin on Saturday. So we have to start taking off our American hats a little bit when we're looking at foreign policy and just look at the facts as they exist. Not everything is about you. We're not heliocentric. Everyone on earth isn't just sitting around thinking about what America is doing at every point in time and making every decision to help Joe Biden or to help Donald Trump, etc. These folks have their own lives, their own agendas, their own problems that don't involve us, and we have to monitor them instead of trying to make them fit into our binary. We had this issue when me and some friends were traveling in Europe, and the waiters started referring to our table as Negra, and some of our friends from the hood were like, "Oh, they calling us the N." We're like, "No, they're not. That's just a word for black in their language. Take your binary out of it. Take your battle lines out of it. They're not calling you the N-word. They even got that word over here. So just get your bread, get your croissants, get your coffee, sit down and let's have a good time."
But it's a different thing. It's a different world, everybody. And you need to be familiarized with how things work outside of the United States. It's a different ball game, everybody. That's why we will find that we have allies with people who might surprise us. But if you really understand their principle-based politics, you shouldn't be surprised. Ted from Bensonville, I'm going to get you on the other side of the break. I want you to join us at the Rainbow Push International Conference, July 15th through the 19th. Call 773-FREEDOM today and go to rainbowpush.org. The Story Hotel here in Chicago is our home base. But we want you to be there. It's going to be great. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT and AM 950 Radio in just a few minutes. Yeah, I think it's important. Welcome to the show, Jeanette Wilson, Pastor Wilson. Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
No. Make sure you stay off mute because if I don't get if you all don't answer quickly, I'm gonna move to the next person. Remember, seconds are inches, are millimeters, centimeters in radio. Robert understands that, and as does Daryl. Dead space on the radio is dead leaf, so you kill it and you keep right on going. But it's I'm glad you explained that, Robert, because people have to understand. I mean, you get over to you go to Africa now. I remember President Kenyatta's wife. This is at his inauguration. They explained her as mixed race. She looks like me. But that's there are a lot of but because of colonialism, because of colonization, they pick up on these things really, really quickly, right? But even then, yeah.
No, I was going to say, I've never been called the N-word more times in a more endearing fashion than in Tokyo, because all they have is our music, and in our music, we call each other the N-word pretty much every other word. Yes, so they thought it was just a term of endearment. So they're walking, that might be the only word of English they know. So I'm sitting here, two things with them. They're like, "Hey, my N-word." I'm like, let's get a whole different way, but I understand that it's not coming from a place of malice.
Absolutely. But when you walk into one of the major department stores in Tokyo about 30 years ago, they had an animal that was pejoratively, I can hear something in the background, everybody. If you're moving something, please stop. Okay. And just know that whenever you move things or whatever's going on in the background, it's amplified on the radio. The radio is not like the human ear. It amplifies all voices and all sounds are at the same level. They had an animal that was supposed to offensively, and it did offensively portray Black people. Mm-hmm. But, when we look at, there's a reason that you have to appreciate Berry Gordy and oh goodness, and Al Bell, because they refused to let Black people be portrayed in a diminished fashion. They refused to do that. Curtis Mayfield refused to use the N-word in his music because he knew how it was going to play internationally. And I remember when Michael had this song, Michael Jackson, They Don't Really Care About Us. I remember the letter that Steven Spielberg sent to him. He said, "We thought we had eliminated the pejorative word about Jewish people from the vocabulary, and you've revived it." I said, "Wow, it's so ironic. in the record industry, these black artists cannot release a record unless they refer to black people in a pejorative way. I said, isn't this interesting? So munch on that for a minute. Munch on that.
But Santita, it's also interesting. I can recall when I was in Barcelona, I was in Spain, going to some of the restaurants, and they had a lot of these prominent Aunt Jemima type figures with the real dark, with the white lips and the, exaggerated features and stuff like that, really prominently displayed. And when I walked in and saw it, of course, I'm immediately just offended by it. But the more I, spoke with folks there, it was more, I guess, contextualized as to what they see being portrayed coming out of the United States as to our figures. And it was similar over on, I went down to the West Bank when I was over in Israel, and the Palestinians, some of them that were around me, immediately started, grabbing for the hair.
10 seconds, everybody.
Because they hadn't seen African Americans, and they were calling me Michael Jackson because that's the only thing they could relate to was Michael Jackson.
But you know what the irony is? The first one of the first heroes of their struggle is a black woman named Connie. She worked for Yasser
Change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
To a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. You need to be with us on the Santita Jackson and Friends page and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, because we have a lot of conversations that we are having offline here. Before I get to you, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, let me bring on Ted from Bensonville. Ted, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, all of you. I guess I'm calling with an observation, with the feeling that a picture or a sight is worth infinite words. And I will say that I have noticed that when I watch the news and I see clips from all around the world, whether it be like a urban area or an event where something just happened and it's highly populated, I marvel at how I see homogeneous populations. In other words, Eastern Europe, boy, when I look at those clips, the people all look the same. When I look at clips from African scenes, people mostly, they all look the same. When I look at clips from American cities, when they throw a camera down the crowded streets of Chicago or New York or San Francisco, I see every kind of person. And so that makes me proud. And they can't even find peace in their countries without absorbing every kind of person from all over the world like we do. Nobody absorbs the people like we do. And all I can say is everybody can have their opinions, but just watch the news and watch how you see a clip from around the world. You see people who look mostly the same, Asia, Africa, Europe, Eastern Europe. When you look at clips of our cities, you see everybody walking together, and that makes it tougher, and that makes us prouder, because we see people all over the world. They can't find peace and prosperity when they don't even have to absorb all kinds of different people from all over the world like we do.
Well, but that's...
so there you go.
No, stay right there, because that speaks to Mr. Patillo's point. And, I have to tell you, first time I spent an extended period of time out of the United States, I was about 14. And I was in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Cuba for about 4 months. And it was funny, but I had to come back to the United States from Europe to go to Cuba. And I had been away from the United States for about 2.5, 3 months. And I was in New York for a couple of days. So as I came off the airplane and I came into Kennedy Airport, I saw everybody, to your point, Ted, in the world. Yeah. And what was wonderful was that, and I just, even as a 14-year-old, I said, wow, I assume that everybody in here, I can't assume that everybody in here is an American or is on their way to becoming that. That having been said, we do have a history in which we have racialized slavery, in which we have racialized what we have done to indigenous people. Now, hold on. I think that to be able to talk about that is what's going to get us well. We cannot skip over the tough parts. We can't. But what we have to do is be able to talk through the tough parts. It's a very interesting thing. We don't have to talk about slavery when you talk about Kamala Harris or even President Obama. But when you get an African American who's descended from slaves, you got to have that conversation. And maybe that's why white people can be sometimes are more comfortable with black people who've immigrated here. And so we have to get over all of that, because all black people are in this hemisphere because we were brought here to work. We have got to talk about all the tough parts too, Ted. I mean, because remember, if you want to get biblical, we all looked the same, spoke the same language, and when we couldn't figure it out, God broke us up, right?
We were all brought here to work, technically. You know what I'm saying?
No, it's not. No. It's not quite the same, because black people were brought here.
Thing, let me say this.
No. I'm gonna let you finish. But
I'm 64.
I have to interrupt you here. No, just hold on. Yeah. Black people were enslaved and brought here. No. It's not the same. Although,
now you took me here. Let me finish this.
I'm going to let you finish. Let me finish.
No.
Ted, don't do that. Let's not engage this way. Don't engage this way. Because I want to engage with you. I do. But we're not going to do it in a disrespectful way. I was simply trying to make the point that when Europeans came here, of course they were escaping a tyranny over in Europe. Absolutely. But black people, our experience here has been a unique one. We were not given our land that was promised to us coming out of slavery. Everything that was promised to us those promises have been reneged. It's not quite the same. You go on, Ted.
Chained at the border, you were chained up waiting for the Europeans to come pick up slaves at the border by your own masters, right? I mean, come on. It's the bad nature of all man, not just white man. You know what I mean?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm not trying to sit here and just make white people the devil. I don't believe in that. But I think that whites have to cop to the bad things that they've done. I think that all people do. And in this American project, and it's a tough conversation to have. It really is. But it's a real conversation that we've got to have if we're going to progress. Look, if you have cancer, cold medicine is not going to work. Americans got a cancer, and it needs chemo. It does not need an aspirin and go to bed and call me in the morning.
I don't know about cancer. We could use some healing. I guess you're going to let me finish. I'm going to finish with this. I'm a retired guy, and I say to myself, I didn't come this far to get down on myself. You know what I mean?
But let me ask you this: why is that conversation? Do you feel that it is diminishing to you? Because I want to get to the heart of it, because I find that a lot. Let me just say this: if you listen to my show at any point, it is never my point to diminish anyone. I believe in lifting up everybody. That having been said, you've got to lift people up in truth. You can't lie. And so I think that's part of the critical race conversation that makes it tough, because a lot of people feel diminished and they feel like you're talking about me. No, I'm talking about an advantage that you were able to get. And your ancestors, we're talking about them. And I'm a product of these ancestors too. So, I mean, come on now. I've got skin in the game, and it's in my bloodstream.
I mean, my family's 2-3 generations in, and all we ever did was work, brought here to work. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I'm very grateful, and I just wanted to say I'm proud of us. And don't read me wrong. It's not like I'm some right winger calling on this.
I'm a right winger, Ted. I wouldn't care.
I got it. All right. But I'm just proud of when you see clips around the world. Like you said, and you talked about when you went up there to the Netherlands. Hey, I'm sure you know, Santita, those are like 3 out of the 5 highest standards of living in the world up there. So that's a really nice. Yeah,
but I also know how Europe got its wealth, and it's got its wealth from the developing world. It did. That's true. And that's true.
Oh yeah. Now we're talking about England and the third.
No, we're talking about all of Europe, because Europe doesn't produce anything but fashion, really. And they have the banks. I mean, that's what they do.
Your guest, Mr. Portillo, who mentioned that England owning 30% of the landmass of the world really kind of changed my perspective. Everybody should look at that. We are the muscle now. We are the muscle now, to defend their lands taken in the Middle Ages. Yeah, I mean, and imagine the power that goes along with owning all that land. Right?
A book by Mr. McDonald, Those Who Run the World. I'm going to get the name for you. It shows you, and it helps you to understand colonialism, because colonialism, all of it was racialized in the developing world, but not all over the world. That's why the Irish and the Northern Ireland, the people of Northern Ireland, fight the crown with such ferocity.
Yeah.
The fact is, the Queen of England and now her son, they are the wealthiest human beings on earth.
Think about it.
Wait a minute. 1/6.
Australia.
That's right.
England.
That's right.
Yeah.
They run
Jamaica.
the world. They own the world. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the Commonwealth, they own your land, and they control.
Like you said, you can't. Can you own a property free and clear in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or England?
No, 89% of it is not. No.
Right. And so, God bless America on that. Listen, I'm not a jingoist, but I am grateful. I guess I'm a grateful American. That's all. But yeah, isn't that unreal? And so that point was brought up by your guest on this show, and it changed my perspective of the world. And that guy's brilliant. All of your guests are brilliant. But everybody should look at that in the long run, we are now, and remember that if France didn't come, you know how everybody laughs if France makes fun of them? If France didn't come to our aid, we would have been, from the Revolutionary War, another one of those countries owned by England.
Oh, trust me, I get it. It's a book that I have. They own. I just want you to know that they own the world, including you. And
and we're their muscle.
Oh, absolutely.
We're their muscle.
That's what we've become. That's what we've become. Dwight, you were about to say something? Stay right there, Ted.
No, I was just saying, even France, on this point on France got its money from Haiti. The reason they had enough money to help America not become British is because they had stolen all the money out of Haiti. Haiti was the richest colony in the world. It made them the richest country in Europe because they were taking all of the wealth out of Haiti. So, it's real hard to get past history. That I do understand the spirit of your point, and that if I understand what you're trying to say correctly, is that you're trying to say is that all these other countries don't have the benefit of being multiracial and multicultural, and that's because you see that as a real asset. And I'm saying it could be an asset if it was probably more equitable in the distribution of the resources. So the cultural dynamics of it all has been a real benefit to the world because, our part of it is we bought the rhythm and we bought, jazz and we bought the slam dunk and, we bought the hip hop. So there's been a great cultural benefit to America. But in terms of the distribution of the wealth that we've generated in this country, that has never been properly distributed. And so even then, white people have 100 times, sometimes 1,000 times more wealth than the non-white people.
Dwight?
Yeah, today. And so I could see, that I think it would be great. And I think we could boogie together if we can benefit together. Don't just let the spirit of the country in terms of all of the different races and cultural groups be social and cultural. Let it be economic and tied into the resources of the country.
And let's understand how we've all been used, Ted. All of us. The fact is, 85% of the world, 15% of the world owns 85% of the land. It's like, how do you do that? It's just, it's unfair. And we need to understand just how unfair all of this. And Kevin Cahill is the author of this book. And so I want you to look at it, because when I saw that Queen Elizabeth owned 1/6 of the world's landmass, I just said, oh my word. I think I called you, Dwight, and said, this is just unbelievable that these people control this much. I said, so now I understand why we make so much over who owns the world. The surprising truth about every piece of land on the planet. That was the book that you were referring to. Who Owns the World? It's by Kevin Cahill. He's an Irish Republican. And that is not lowercase r. That is someone who they don't want to be slave to the rhythm of the crown. So I'm sorry we held you up, Reverend Wilson.
And that goes to white.
And that goes to white people. Me on.
Of course, it goes to white people too. I mean, this is a white guy who wrote the book, and he wrote it from the vantage point of being an Irishman in Great Britain.
Well, I think white people can. One of the things.
Hold on, very quickly, Dwight, so I can bring in Reverend Wilson.
Yeah, white people can't own land in Canada, and white people can't own land in Australia. The Queen owns. And so white at that level does not give you an advantage if you're not in the royal family, if you're not in that royal bloodline. This is about bloodlines more than it is about color.
Absolutely. Look, you had Queen Charlotte. You've already had a black person in Windsor Castle. Okay, so Meghan ain't new. Okay, and 94% of the Commonwealth countries are countries of color. But the fact is, if you go to Northern Ireland right now, they are true freedom fighters, Ted. I'm hearing you. And I just don't want you to be under the misimpression that I think that this is just, as Robert put it, binary, black, white. No, it's a little deeper than that. And trying to help us to understand that has been the fight of the Rainbow Coalition. That was Dr. King's fight. His last major campaign was the anti-poverty campaign. That was not a campaign that was confined to black people. It was about eliminating poverty for everybody. We're all under the same system, and we're all disadvantaged by it. Reverend Wilson, you got the floor.
Well, I've enjoyed listening to this discussion, and I think that I believe that if all of us would really study and read Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he really takes us beyond this question of black and white, but really it's really about wrong and right, as your father has often said. This idea of white supremacy has hurt the world. This idea of an Aryan race of people, the more perfect race, has hurt the world. And all of the colonialism and movements across the world have been about economic power and controlling the world's resources. That's why the effort to colonize the continent of Africa. That's why there's so much tension between America and China and Japan and India, because we want to control the resources, people resources, as well as the natural resources, many of them of which are found on the continent of Africa. And we have to begin to look at who is manipulating this process. It's not poor whites. They are being used in this major scheme of this minority of people who are controlling the economy. They have to stay in power, and the way they do that is you keep the people on the bottom fighting each other and anti each other. And that's why I loved when Robert said he's been all over the world, and the only time he's been most disrespected is in this country, because other people are focused on real issues. We're focused on color issues, because that has been used to keep people separated. And, you look at this geopolitical movement that we are embraced in. It's not a party versus the people. It is the money versus the masses. And I think if the masses would come together, we can change the course of history and certainly change our presence in America. Unfortunately, African Americans did not just say, "Oh, I want to go to the land of the free and the home of the brave." We could not see the Statue of Liberty because we were at the bottom of the ship. We were chained and brought here as products, not as people. And that's the part of history that we must store. We don't hate white people, but we know how we got here. And it's different than me, traveling through the jungle, coming from wherever with my family and all of my belongings, because I think things are going to be better when I get here. That's not our story at all. And that pain, and then when you get here and you work real hard, Many of us worked very hard. We built the railroads. We built the capitals of every state. We're still building them, and yet we're not paid for that. And there have been no reparation at all. We built the major universities. All these universities that are Harvard, Princeton, Yale. We built them. We could not attend them, and still had to have a certain thing to get into them.
Whew. It's a whole lot when we are looking at this thing, Daryl Jones. I have a few minutes left before we have to get off the air here, but I'm going to get full closing thoughts from everybody on the other side. But Daryl Jones, 1 minute, your thoughts? Whew.
Well, Santita, just listening to our conversation, one of the things that stuck in my mind was when Ted was talking about the role of the white folks in our society, and feeling, and I may have misunderstood him, but it sounded as though at one point he was getting defensive, thinking that we were attacking him and attacking white folks, and trying to, he said that diminishing himself because of the historical analysis of what has happened to people of color as a result of white folks. And it's very similar, because as you know, I'm just coming out of a fight with DeSantis down in Florida, and it's very similar to what DeSantis was trying to do down there, and attacking the critical race theory and attacking the teaching of African American history in the state of Florida, and trying to now even have the accreditation policy and process changed so that the state of Florida can set its own accreditation policy and begin to wipe away some of the history. So when I was listening to Ted speak, I was beginning to wonder if he was coming out of that vein of trying to just sort of change what is being taught in the historical context of the Black experience in the United States. And, I guess at the end of it, he was saying that, I think he came around to the point of saying, he wasn't attacking critical race theory. He wasn't attacking the accurate teaching of American history, but he just didn't feel bad, I guess, about the history that was being taught. Well, history is history, and the facts are the facts, and you got to put them out there so that we can progress as a people. And I think to me, that's the big piece of this right now, is being certain that we get accurate history out there so that people can learn and grow from that, Santita.
Well, it also gives lie to this, I made it on my own, by my own bootstraps. The way was paid for. You stand on a lot of shoulders. Nobody makes it on their own. My goodness, a child needs its mom or somebody who's going to give them sustenance. So, no one makes it on their own. And the fact is, white people have been given tremendous advantage in this country, and even then, you're still at the bottom. We are all being jammed here. We have all been bamboozled, if you will. We have been. All of the land rights that Americans had 200-300 years ago are slowly being peeled back. If you notice, more and more of us cannot own a home. That's why the American dream is so crucial. Because for you to be able to own a home and the land underneath it can make you queen or king, or certainly you put you in charge of your life. More and more that is becoming untrue, Robert Patillo. And that is what's awful. Is Robert still there? Well, Dwight McKee?
Yeah.
Okay. So your final thoughts about this? Ted took us in a direction which I thought was very interesting, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I understood again the spirit of his point, that he thinks that because now we're so homogeneous and so multiracial and multicultural, it's a good thing. And in many ways, it is a good thing that we've been able to, in some ways, come out of this and not one people with, 2 or 3 spirits, but people who bonded around certain values and certain commitments. And that's a good thing. But it does not eradicate what Jeanette just talked about, that it may end up that way. That's not what it's founded on. And that 300 years in the middle of that is a lot of inequity and a lot of injustice that have never been remedied. I would have liked him to have said that I think it's a real great thing that now we are one in the spirit. Now let's make us one in the flesh. let's look at how we can equalize the playing field by paying these people the money that they never got when at the beginning of this process, when they was working to make this country what it is, that most of the people are benefited by, and very few of them, of other people, are benefited by.
Absolutely.
And how do we make the native people who we stealing all of it?
Dwight, I'm going to have to stay right there. I have to cut out real quick. Everybody, first of all, wish Dwight a happy birthday. It was his birthday yesterday. So stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. That's
happy
right.
birthday, Dwight.
It was Dwight's birthday. That's right. That's right. I'm going to take him to McDonald's this week. That's my special treat.
What about again?
Okay. I don't know. Told him that.
It's really for everybody.
Happy meal. Okay, sleep on that. All right. That's okay. Well, that's what he said he wanted. I love you. Say happy birthday to Dwight, everybody. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Oh, love you, everybody. Thank you, Devin, for a great show. God bless you. See you at the Rainbow Push Convention, July 15th to the 19th. Oh, Dwight, happy birthday. But you know what? I heard Ted. And I hear so many Teds. And my mother even said, you're going to have to find a way to have this conversation because this is a tough conversation to have. And it's tough for white people to hear because they feel that they've come here. Everybody's Horatio Alger, and they've come here and they've made it, and they just made it on their own. No, you made it on a country that was built on stolen land by stolen people who were not paid for their labor. Of course, you were going to become an economic superpower. You didn't have to pay for anything. You got everything. You got everything for free. Stole it, and then you have people who were starving in Europe who said, "Wait a minute, you mean there's a place called America, a beacon on a hill, that can give me an advantage? I don't have to live under a king or a queen." I get it. I am not mad at you, Ted. I am not mad, but I'm just telling you got to get the whole story. You got to get it straight. Okay, Barbara Bacon, Jarvis. All right, Carol. Everybody's wishing you a happy birthday. Yes. Oh yeah. We just have to tell the whole story. It's not. It's not problematic for me. Most Black people are not walking around in the world with a chip on their shoulders with respect to white people. Nor are most Black people walking around thinking that they made it on their own. Now, there's some of us who think we get a little special, Dwight and Robert and Daryl, and Jeanette, they think that they didn't need a Dr. King, or they don't need a Reverend Jesse Jackson. They don't need. You do need an advocate. Reverend still gets called from some of the biggest Black folks because they can't get deals. Or now, or the people who've gotten the big deals, they've gotten them because of phone calls that he made, because of his actions on behalf of you. So we have to look at all of that. And he didn't do it for himself. He did it because you're talking about making things fair, making things right, making things just. So, let's look at all of it. I just have to figure out, I think, Dwight and Robert and Jeanette and Daryl, we have to figure out a way to have this kind of conversation, because we're not going to get anywhere if you don't have Ted's buy-in. And I'm not saying you got to throw him over the side of the ship, but he needs to understand. It's got to be put in. This is a tough conversation for whites to have with their own children. I told you about this. My father campaigning in Iowa in 1987. At the beginning of the 88 campaign cycle, and he went to a little school, and the kids in the kindergarten, first grade room, they ran up to him and they were hugging. They were just so sweet. And there was one child in the corner who was crying and trembling. And it's not an oversimplification. You had to see it. He was crying and trembling. And my father, being a father, just eased his way over to him and said, "Son, are you okay?" And he was frightened to death. And long story short, he said, "My parents told me that if you become president, you're going to do to us what white people did to your people." I mean, he almost missed the next event, but it was totally worth it to him to talk to this child and to reassure him that is not what I'm doing here. You know, I mean, so it's a conversation that we need to have because this is a real fear that many white people have. And you can't just throw people over the bus and say it doesn't, your fears don't matter. They do matter. My fears matter. Everybody matters. Everybody. I mean, Dwight, so, I mean, what did you read from Ted? First of all, Ted, if he's still listening, I'm glad that he called in. Because somehow or another, we've created enough space on this show that even when people disagree fundamentally, or in some element of what we've said, they still feel that they're going to call in and be respected properly. And even as he and I went back and forth, he stayed. I just, I don't, because I'm not trying to have that kind of conversation with you. I want to have a respectful one, and I want to engage you, and I'm going to give you more than the 2 minutes that they say that you're supposed to have on radio, because I think that you're speaking for a lot of people, Ted, and I'm glad that you did. Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, the danger of the melting pot theory is that it conflates realities that are not inflatable, that are not parallel. And it assumes that, you bought the potatoes and I bought the meat and somebody else bought the we stirred that up and turned it into one big stew, one big bowl. Mm-hmm. And that's really not enough work. This Illinois is an Indian name. Mm. This is the land of the Illinois. Now you can find very few of them now. We live in the land of the Illinois. Chicago is a Potawatomi thing. It's the Irish. They run it, but they didn't own it or start it. They stole it. This land is a stolen land. By stolen people. And see from the terms that you have benefited by. And the reason most white people can't agree in the first place is because coming out of Europe, they couldn't have any equity in Europe as the royal families had them down. Mm-hmm. Most of them left Europe who lived at the castle, who served the king, who served the queen, made the pawns in the chessboards of Europe. And that's why America became such a valuable place to them, because this really was their only option to be somebody.
Absolutely.
Don't bring that dysfunctionality and try to mythologize it and put it in some virtue that came out of this situation and made it better for yourself. God bless you, but you did it at the expense of people who already lived here, who you locked up or killed or put in exile. And you did it at the expense of people who you put on ships, the bottom of ships, and brought over here to work for you, so you could get those benefits. That's the reality that we live in.
Does anyone else have something to say behind that?
Just real quick. Yeah, just real quick. I think that part of the discussion has to be a broad-based one, because when I was speaking with Marion Williams, and I thank you so much, Santita, for helping to coordinate that and have her on my show yesterday. She talked about the education she had to go through to better understand the African American community, because often, and she talked about this during the interview, just being a white woman, being progressive, thinking that you're kind of hip and up on things. She said when she started talking to black communities, she realized that she still had some of that latent thought patterns, similar to what was just mentioned. Like, hey, my family had to work for what we had. We didn't have white privilege. We came from nothing, etc. Kind of the American story. But then understanding after speaking with people the difference between what they went through. I think most people have to go through that. And then even as African Americans, as we talked earlier about traveling, start going to developing
developing world and then start understanding how privileged your existence has been. We're start talking to people around the world when you start saying, well, we were discriminated against here because they wouldn't serve us at a restaurant. And they'll say, well, we were discriminated here because they killed everybody in our village and stole our resources and then took our women off. There's levels to this. And I think we all have to come from a place of understanding and empathy. And that gets us to a stronger position on what we can do to fight against the actual issues that we have, which is the international capitalist power structure that has been used to oppress all of us throughout the centuries. And that once we get to this place where we say, well, the struggle of African Americans here during the civil rights movement was very similar to the struggle for decolonization in Africa, which is very similar to the struggle for decolonization in Southeast Asia, which is similar to the struggle against the imperial powers in Central and South America. And if we all start working together, then we are the global majority is able to overturn the last millennia of domination by the European continent and bring about the type of fairness and equity needed to lift up all people. There should not be a developing world. There should just be a world. And that only exists because you can have billionaires and little submarines. You can have the queen with her, and the king with their diamond of Africa stuck to a hat, those sorts of things. In order for them to have all that, it means millions have to starve over the rest of the world. Then once we realize that and fight against it, we make progress.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I read this book. It was Jackie's Girl, My Life with the Kennedy Family by Nancy McKeon. And what was wonderful by Kathy McKeon. I'm thinking of Nancy McKeon, the actress, Kathy McKeon. And she is an Irish immigrant. She's still living. And she was the nanny to Mrs. Kennedy's 2 children. But before she got to the United States, she described for you her life in Ireland. And in the early 60s, the early to mid 60s, she did not have heat in her home, indoor plumbing. I mean, this is how people under the crown live right now. This is how they live. When you go to Northern Ireland, this is what you see. So when whites come to the United States of America from Europe, I get it. I do. But, we have to understand that we got here in different ways, as Reverend Jackson says, in different boats, but we're in different ships, but we're in the same boat now. And that's the only point that I'm trying to make. But white people become very, very defensive, not all, but some. And what do you think opened Marion Williamson up to this re-education process? Mark. Not Mark, but Robert. I'm sorry.
Conversations. I think conversations are often when you bring, as mentioned earlier about America being more heterogeneous than other countries. Walter Rodney had a great book, Grounding with My Brothers, that talks about the value of being able to, and the change of perspective you have of just having regular human conversations. So not campaign speeches, not events, not book signings, but sitting down and having conversations with people and understanding their plight from a humanistic level. For me, I grew up in rural Waverly Hall, Georgia, in a double-wide trailer with nothing but rednecks around me. So I understand the plight of poor, white, rural America. And when they say, well, what privilege have I had? We were all sitting there in the same trailer park as with each other playing as kids. So when you have that type of conversation and interaction with other communities, where you understand the struggles they go through, and that they're similar. And then once you start understanding, as Dwight mentioned earlier, that the power structure at the top has a vested interest in making sure that the poor white person thinks it's the poor black person's fault that they're poor. The poor black person thinks it's the poor Mexican person's fault that they're poor. The poor Mexican person thinks it's the poor El Salvadorian person's fault that they're poor. Because as long as we're all in this circular firing squad at the bottom, we're not focusing up at the top to the people running around with the millions and the billions and the trillions, as it would be, that are truly controlling things. People have to remember that to get $1 billion, you have to make $1 million a month for 83 years to get to $1 billion. So even if you tried to spend $1 billion, it would be almost impossible in a human lifetime. You'd have to spend $12 million a year just to go through $1 billion. and someone like Elon Musk has $230 billion. If he spent $1 million a month, it would take more than the history of mankind on the planet to spend that money. But yet and still, you got Bloods and Crips fighting over, a area of land to make $20 sales on the corner. Yeah. This is the inequity within our system, and we have to start focusing on that vertical inequity as opposed to the horizontal differences we have.
Dwight McKee, do you have a response to that?
Well, I think Robert pretty much said it all, yeah, and I think that's what the role of education plays in all of this, because it's like you saying that, like a white person saying that, the beauty of America is all of the different shades of colors that our people have. They are brown people and black people and lighter people and mid-range people and chocolate people. And saying, and that's just such a beautiful looking people. Yeah, it's true, but you ignore the fact that the reason that exists is because somebody raped our great grandmother.
There is that.
Over again.
Stop. Do you know what my mother said? She said, because the first time I went to Africa with my parents, I was 7. And they would look at you and they'd say, oh, you're from, this is 1970, 71. So, they're looking at you and, this is what we're just really going back. I mean, big numbers, right? And they look at you and they say, oh, they looked at my mother and said, you're from this tribe. Boom. They went right there. They looked at my father. They went, well, Arab, but we love his politics. So, okay. And they looked at me with my big afro. And my mother said, the man looked at her and said, oh, so much has happened. Now I'm 7, so I don't know what he's talking about. I didn't, I didn't know what he was talking about. And my mother, maybe a few years later, said, you are evidence that something went very wrong. Not that you're wrong, but something went very wrong. And then, which led me to a couple of years later, 3 or 4 years later, my grandmother and her anger, who you knew, my grandmother Helen, her anger about roots. You could not discuss roots with her, Dwight. You couldn't mention it to her. She said, do you think I want to be reminded of why we look as we do? She said, do not ever mention that to me, ever. I said, whoa, okay. And I remember calling my father because I was out in California with her because my grandfather just passed away and she went and stayed with my Uncle Chuck and his wife. And I said, did I say something wrong? He said, there are a lot of contradictions. He said she was honored for what she looked like, but then you can see underneath it, there is a strain of shame.
And Tita, if you don't come to terms with that, then you when those products of that rape and plunder say, where is that which you owe me, or what you did to me? It gives them the pretext to say, well, wait a minute. Why would you charge me for you being so beautiful, or so multiracial, or so multi-ethnic? And your response, our response is, because it wasn't by our choice that we got here. This was imposed upon us against our will. And so it gives them an excuse and a reason to say, no, this has been one equal playing field. While at the same time ignoring that the government gave the Europeans 160 acres if they worked the land for 5 years for free, for the right of the title. And 400,000 Europeans were the benefactors of free land that now they've had for generations, which gave them the start here that they never had in Europe. And so these things on their surface may not look important, but when you look into the deeper part of it, it explains why that inequity is so profound and so severe. And they look at the inequity and say and claim it to be our fault. It's your fault that you're broke. It's your fault you poor. It's your fault that we have 100 times more money than you. And so since it's your fault, we have no responsibility for that. Because we've gotten everything we've gotten because we've worked real hard and we've been real industrious. And it's just a distortion of history that has to be dealt with.
Absolutely. And I
came. And what, do you think that plays into what Ted said? Does that play into what Ted said when he started to say that, it was the Africans that sold the Africans into slavery, sort of removing themselves from a level of responsibility, saying that you all did it to yourselves. Mm-hmm. Isn't that consistent with what you're laying out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that part could be true, that Africans did play a role, but that does not extricate the role you played.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That is because they also at fault. I mean, you wasn't at fault. I mean, you wasn't the benefactor, the beneficiary of all of what. I mean, the benefactor of all that we're looking at today. And the fact that we, bled for your right to have this and still been discriminated against. The fact that we've been the margin of profit for you for the last 300 years, and you live in this kind of lifestyle at our benefit, that does not extract you from what your benefits are in this. Let the Africans pay, but also let you pay.
Hello.
And Santita, my grandfather used to say, much as your grandparents were telling you that, and he couldn't sit and watch Roots with me because it was just too real for him with regard to what had occurred. Yeah. And one of the things that used to be said, and I stick by it to this day, when we talk about the process, and we always talk about America being this great melting pot. And I don't believe it's a great melting pot. I think it's more of a pressure cooker would be a better descriptor for what it is. The melting pot just sort of implies that everybody just sort of blends together at some point. I think it's more people are pressurized together, pressurized to force their experiences and to deal with one another. So it's more of a pressure cooker experience than a melting pot experience. And the question is, do you hold on to your identity, and how do you hold on to it, and how do you make it respected within the greater picture of this American experience? And I think that's still what we're going through, is this pressure cooker.
Absolutely.
And there's more. What's name McKee and Jackson. There's more of us named Jackson and McKee than them named Ogabe. I've never met a white person named Ogabe, ever. But I've met millions of white people with these Irish names and these British names. And so the imbalance is inherent in the name structure. That if this has been one jumbo pot, one melting pot, then how come there are not as many Ogames on the white side as there are Jacksons on the black side? No, this is imbalanced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at some point, you have got, not at some point, now is the time for you to understand it and accept it. And then accept responsibility for your advantage. It is what it is. There is a wealth gap in this society. It's racial. It's also based in gender. Accept it. Let's just get it right. That's all I'm saying. And Ted, if you're still watching, I'm glad that you stayed. I'm glad that you stayed, because until we can have the conversations with the Teds, and they are many, and walk away from the conversations willing to continue further the discussions, and with an understanding that we have a lot to learn from one another, then okay. But there's a fundamental understanding or misunderstanding of history that you have, and there's also a fundamental need that you have to believe that you've done this all by yourself. Didn't happen like that. No. It didn't happen like that. If you watch the movie Far and Away, it's one of my favorite films. It's a Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman movie. What was interesting about it is he's an Irish immigrant, and as is she, but she was wealthy and he was poor, impoverished. And they came to America because they were giving land away to European immigrants. Now, mind you, the indigenous people whose land was being taken from them, they couldn't get their land back. And by treaty, you can see that this land is theirs. That's why I'm really surprised by Kavanaugh on the court, because he has turned out to be a staunch defender of indigenous rights. It was just another decision. Did you see that one, Robert, last week, in which he said, you're asking indigenous people.
That was Gorsuch.
Yeah. Excuse me, not Kavanaugh. Gorsuch. Yeah.
The Supreme Court ruled that the Navajo Reservation in Oklahoma basically ostensibly in violation of a 1868 treaty that guaranteed as part of the negotiation between the Navajo Nation and the U.S. Guaranteed to provide for their needs as a community, including food, water, the safety, welfare, basically a state within a state concept. Well, now because of the river war, or the water wars over the Colorado River, the Navajos have been cut out of their rightful amount of fair water usage as the Colorado River basin has decreased over the course of the last several decades. And they went to court saying, well, we need our percentage of the water. By treaty, the U.S. guaranteed this in 1868. And the Supreme Court said, no, y'all don't get anything. To hell with you. I don't care what we wrote on that paper. Just as every other treaty America's ever made with the Native Americans. And Justice Gorsuch wrote a scathing dissent in that case. Scathing of all people, and I'm hoping the Biden administration takes this and changes course, because it's not the Navajos' fault that y'all built Las Vegas, a giant city in the middle of a desert where it's not supposed to be at. It's not the Navajos' fault that Los Angeles is using a disproportionate amount of the water out of the Colorado River. It's not the Navajos' fault that y'all created climate change by living out of balance with nature, and therefore the rivers are drying up. But they're the ones who are facing the punishment for it by their communities nearly starving to death. And some believe this is simply an effort by the federal government again to force Navajos off their land, because if there's no water, they'll be off their land, provide that to white corporations and settlers yet again. And this is the 21st century. This is last weekend. And then they'll be able to take that area back and expand to Oklahoma as to it. Remember, the entirety of Oklahoma is stolen. The whole state is the entire concept of the Oklahoma Sooners. The white people got to Oklahoma, they started settling it, and then when they set up a territorial government, they told European settlers, however much land you can mark off tomorrow morning is the amount of land you get. So people got there a day before and marked off their own land before everyone else could get there, the best land. They got there sooner than everybody else. That's why we call them the Oklahoma Sooners. They stole the land before everyone else could steal it. And so even the native of the Navajo and the Cherokee tribes, who are already relocated there from Georgia through the Trail of Tears, were guaranteed their own state of Sequoia there, but the white people stole that from them. So then the Navajos wrote their own constitution to petition to become a state, because they figured, well, maybe they can't steal our land if we become a state. And so they wrote a constitution, petition to become a state, met all the criteria, and the state of Sequoia was almost created, but was voted down in the Congress. So then a couple years later, the state of Oklahoma took the Navajo constitution for the state of Sequoia, word for word, and made it the Oklahoma Constitution that exists till today. And that is why the state of Oklahoma exists. And for all the work that the Native Americans did, we put them on a reservation, and then 100 years later, we starved them out with no water. That is what America does to Native communities.
And put smallpox in blankets. And I see... And that last opinion, oh my Lord. I mean, but I look at what Gorsuch has been writing in defense of indigenous people, and quite frankly, he has stunned me. And I'm glad. I'm glad. Surprised me. I'm glad.
And Robert, that's the history of America. The history of America is one treaty what stolen land, a treaty. The treaty does not work for the whites, so they break the treaty and send the Indians to the next area that they can habitate for a minute until they become valuable to the Europeans. And then they go and take that land and break that treaty. You cannot understand America unless you understand the breaking of treaties.
With
you can't understand
indigenous people.
But you understand.
With indigenous people.
Guadalupe.
That's right. With indigenous people.
It's still in their land. The history of this country is them lying, making a treaty, still in the land, and at whatever point that does not work for the new Europeans, they break that treaty and send them to another land and then renegotiate around that. And there's been hundreds of those situations. That is the real history of the country. And then they bring us over here to work the land, and then they have got most of the benefits from it.
That's right.
For free, by the way.
LBJ started looking through our documents, America's documents, and he said, wait, you've got the right to vote, but it has not been enforced. It's been almost 100 years. It's been 95 years. And that's why he, at the signing of the Voting Rights Act, said, okay, now Negro leaders, you must now go and teach them to be citizens, because that is at the core of your citizenship, your right to vote. All these broken promises. The first time you drop a bomb on the United States, you drop it on Black people who have become the model people in the United States of America. Oh no, y'all. We've got to find a way to be able to have this conversation. And everybody's got to grow up so that you can have it. And stop believing that you just got here from there to here on your own. It doesn't happen like that for anybody. And it certainly didn't happen that way for you. It's not how it works, y'all. So, does anyone else have anything else that they want to say? Well, Effie Ross says being greedy and breaking of treaties. That's your takeaway from the show today. I hear you, Effie. Whew. Does anyone else have anything else they want to say? Daryl, how can we hear you on the radio? Is Daryl still there? Okay, Robert, how can we hear you on the radio?
Sundays 1 to 4, News Until 1380. You also go to my YouTube page, youtube.com/Jobs Justice Dreams, where we post clips and interviews from throughout the week. We have the interview with Marianne Williamson from yesterday. Also, I was on Fox News talking about the Supreme Court yesterday, so we're going to have that video up tomorrow also. So we're going to make sure people get that. So if you're not not sitting by your radio on a Sunday, you'll still be able to pick up the show and catch up, because media is a never-ending beast.
Never-ending beast. Dwight McKee, birthday man, is there anything you'd like to say before I take you to Mickey D's?
I just want to say, I hope that the United States don't miscalculate this thing in Russia in such a way as they think now Ukraine can win this, and they start investing more and more resources in the Ukraine. Think that now they can overturn Putin in Russia. I think it'll be a miscalculation, and I think we'll pay for this.
Why do you think it's a miscalculation?
Because I think that China is in the cut, waiting to help Russia if they need the help, and would be willing to send people to undergird Putin if that's necessary. And so I think the net impact is that over here, is that it's going to weaken Biden's position over here over time, because those resources that will be redirected to the war over there will have to be taken from the bottom of this economy, which is what we saw last week with that negotiation around the ceiling, debt ceiling, create more and more poverty, more and more unemployment, more problems at the bottom of the economy. And it will feed into Trump's position that, some deal has been cut. with the Ukrainians by the Biden family to support them, come what may, because they're getting paid from the bottom. And Robert say, it's crazy, but just because it's crazy don't mean it won't work. And so I think that that you put all that in play, and it gives Republicans a whole platform, a whole dance floor to tap dance on once these events kick into play. So I hope that we don't misread that situation.
Well, if you look at the corporate media, we are well on our way to misreading it. And it's just, it's hubris, really. It's just like, you really, really think that everybody in the world is dumb, but and you're the only smart ones in the room. Crazy. If you see all the cheerleading that was happening in the British and American media on Saturday, it was embarrassing, quite frankly. It was embarrassing. It's like, you're misreading this. This miscalculation will hurt us. But Dr. King foresaw our hubris being our downfall, among other things. I mean, and here we are. Because it shows you that Putin is weak. Okay.
And the British, if they can have it their way, would have the Romanovs back on the throne, which was their cousins.
Oh, my gosh. Absolutely. Well, my lovely people, I'm going to let you go. This is, as always, I love being with you all every day. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. And Dwight, so many of us wish you a happy birthday today. We love you so much.
Thank you.
And everybody's very excited about your birthday. They want to know what you're going to do. McDonald's. Rock and roll McDonald's, though. That one. The fancy one. Let me not crack on McDonald's, because I sure do love their iced tea and their coffee with lots and lots of cream, everybody. If coffee doesn't have a lot of cream, I don't have any use for it. Like my mama Helen used to let me have coffee with her in the morning, and it was like candy.
Santita, I will tell you a quick story about your dad. We were at the Rainbow Push conference. It had to be 10 years ago, at least, maybe 15 years ago. So I was still a student at Kent. No, so more than 15 years ago. It had to be 2007 or 8. And I was in the car with Reverend. I was talking to him about the conference. And when you say talking to him, I mean talking at him while he paid no attention. And so we were talking about the education panel we were going to. So I was giving him my ideas. Him still not paying any attention. We get to the conference. He gets on stage with all the heads of the major school districts in the country. So the superintendent in New Orleans, superintendent in D.C., etc. to talk about education. So the Reverend looks over at me out of the crowd. He points at me and motions for me to come up to him. I'm like, he was listening the whole time. He wants me to get up here and talk about education. All right, let me be ready. Let me go on up here and talk to these folks. So he pulled me close. He said, these are coffee, 2 creams, 1 sugar. So I had to slink off to go get him a cup of coffee. And I should mention, he never gave me the $3 for the coffee back either, but...
But he's a savant, because guess what?
Exactly.
If you ask him, you think he has not listened to you, he will recount everything that you have said to him.
Not just that, he actually said half of the stuff that I said while he was talking to the school board, to the school board leader. So he was listening. So that's when I learned the way to talk to Reverend Jackson through osmosis.
Oh my gosh! I mean, one day my brothers and I sat down. Jackie was just sitting there, and we were going to get Dad straight about this, that, and the other. And he said, "Okay." And he sat down. And he said, "Okay, all of you speak." And we thought I was going to say what I was going to say. And he was going to respond, no. He said, no, I want all of you to speak. Oh, my gosh. By the time we were done, Jonathan said, man, Dad, you have an advantage. You do this for a living. Because he came back and pew, 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 shot us out of the sky, each one, after we had given him. I mean, we talked for about 30 minutes, honey. And one by one, he destroyed everybody's point. You were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he just did this to me. Yeah. Yeah, he did it. Oh boy. Oh, you gotta love him. He is a quirky one, huh? He is a quirky one, but that's who he is. Bless his heart.
That's to say the least.
Yeah, well, with greatness comes quirks. We're not going to get Mrs. Patillo on here to talk about you because see, I've known Dwight forever. I know.
She will flee the country if she had to tell you about all my quirks.
Oh, honey, that's right. And I already know Dwight's a nut. So bless his heart. Bless all y'all. I just try to bring a little sanity to you and Daryl and Dwight. I try. Try to be the.
Just imagine being my wife and stuck in the car with me on a road trip as I break down Navajo history to you.
No. Have in fact, I'm going to call you right now. As soon as I get off the air. But I love you, everybody. Dwight, happy birthday. On Wednesday, I'm going to see him for his birthday. Like I said, rock and roll McDonald's. I can't wait. Anything you want on the menu. Boom. It's for you. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Burger King. Oh, Culver's. Okay. You got some choices now. Love you. Oh, bless your heart. But it's been great. I love you, everybody.